This is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight. Now, Monty, the LPL is finished, and Jingdong Gaming, or JDG, because I'm a boomer, so I use the old school names. They're actually called JD Gaming now, because everyone knows what a nightmare the rebrands in China are. Where actually, like some Orwellian stuff, you rebrand to mean nothing. Like, that acronym means nothing. Like,
TSM, classic.
but anyway, so obviously the thing is, they have yet to lose a best of 5 this entire year. They've gotten as high as they can go without having to suffer any pain at all. And that reminds me of the freeze pipe, because it both can't be beat when it comes to its peers, and it ensures you can get as high as you like without suffering the irritation and pain of hot smoke getting to your lungs. On a scale of 3, 6, and 9, I'd give it a clear 9. So clear that bomb. And just take the food safe glycerin chamber and put it in the freezer section for a mere hour. Don't worry, it's only going to be missing temporarily. Once it comes back, which Jingdong Gaming's brilliant at, you'll be set for a truly great night. Now, turn your cannabis smoking session into a canna V and win the day by smoking weed. That was a reach, but whatever. They can't all be brilliant, guys. With the freeze pipe, code LFN at thefreezepipe.com for 10% off your order. So get one for your home. Import a freeze pipe to your smoking setup today. It's the undisputed ruler.
That was magnificent.
I got everything. Listen, the Kanavi one. You think I'm a better one for Kanavi. There's nothing for that one. I had to read. That was a reach, but it's all good. It's all good. The rest was good.
That's right. They've got a new martini bubbler as well. Classy new glass piece. And they have this fun little thing we've talked about before, which is the blunt tip, which you can put a joint into. Obviously, you can get those pre-rolled at most dispensaries. Or you can even use a vape pen that's compatible with 510 cartridges. And this only has to go in for 20 minutes. And this thing can just live permanently in your freezer, guys, no problem. Yeah. So that's really quite a fun new little piece, and very portable as well, easy to take around. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of variety that they have. And they've got even more variety coming out kind of like monthly, just new products. So blunt tip, martini bubbler are new if you haven't checked those out yet. And we've actually got some preview pieces that haven't even been released yet for you guys that are really cool that we're excited to show you in the coming few weeks. So there you go. Thank you very much to the Freeze Pipe. Still an awesome sponsor. And again, guys, sponsoring, supporting our sponsors is the very best way to support us. So if you guys have been looking for perhaps a gift for your friend or a new piece of glass yourself, here's a good time to go get it. Thank you very much.
You know, the problem I've realized, even though it does add to the humor because it makes it obvious what I'm doing, that's artifice. The real problem, Monty, is I never do speak in that really controlled manner. Like, well, you know, the thing about, like, I never do that. The problem is I'm too intense. So as soon as I do that voice, you know, like, right, where's it? Come on then. Where's it? What product's coming now? You know what's
part of the fun, though. I think that's part of the fun. I think that's part of the fun. People don't know where you're going with it.
And by the way, if at any point I'm talking about things like heat, health, like what's better, understand, guys, disclaimer, I am not a doctor. I just played one in a Flashpoint skit. It's true. You can go look it up. I was there with Anders Bloom, checking him out mentally and stuff. Brilliant.
That was before ESL invented skits in Counter-Strike.
Exactly. It's weird how they do that, isn't it? They always seem to invent stuff that we do, but just a couple of years late. Bloody hell. We must just have time travel technology or something. I don't know. It's mental, isn't it?
We are the true Time Lords.
Someone could, by the way, it wouldn't take that much effort. Someone could make an amazing edit just using the whole sequence from Back to the Future 2, where old Biff goes and takes the Great Sports Almanac and goes back and changes that. They could just take that and make it Riot just stealing Dota, etc. Right? Like, I'm just saying, guys, if someone's got editing skills, there's an amazing edit just waiting for you right there. Like, that would actually be sick. That would be so good.
So we did have a new All-Pro vote from the LEC this week. Thoughts, Thorin, after our massive criticism of the LCK All-Pro putting all of KT first team and all of all of Gen.G's second team in the last week?
Well, the main problem here is, like, also, that's another thing. We've touched on it a little bit on this show, but why has that gone under the radar? Like, dude, I've told you, we said this about the LPL one last week. I love the fact that these tournaments now in the modern day have, like, the sports style thing, like a regular season MVP, All-Pro, so that you can be on, like the best example ever is it didn't happen, but if this had been a normal split of, like, how old LEC ran, then in spring, Jankos would have actually made All-Pro, even though he was on one of the worst teams, because he was just a really good player, even though his team sucked. Why have they changed everything now? Like, as far as I can tell, wasn't it just, Monty, that now you just do one All-Pro for the whole year? That sounds terrible. Not least because the number one problem with all votes in League of Legends is recency bias. And if you go look at who they voted for, they have just done recency bias. Like, have you seen how many times XL has, like, coaching staff, like, people at the top? Like, give me a break, mate. Like, you've basically just done it off the last split, haven't you?
So they have been doing them every split. So this is particularly for the summer split.
Yeah, but that's the problem, though. This is the dumbest part. Like, the reason why I really lampoon LCK is that was just the regular season, and you're giving all of those. They're doing it here, Monty, where you vote for All-Pro after the playoffs. Like, what is that? Like, I still don't even really understand what you are voting for there. Like, essentially, isn't the game rigged so that to not be in the first team, you have to be really fucking bad if you win? Like, what are we voting for? You know what I mean?
I can't even really tell what they're voting for, because, like, for the players, it was just for the summer split. But for the coaching staff, it says number one coaching staff of the LEC season. So it feels like they're giving year-end awards, right, for coaching staff, but we haven't actually seen year-end awards for players. And yet the summer All-Pro, it's just for summer All-Pro, and we haven't seen, like, a season MVP. Maybe that's yet to be announced, to be fair. The coaching staff was announced just 4 hours ago, but it is confusing. It's confusing, again, because of the formats that they're using. So it seems like they are going to have more season-ending awards before the season finals actually begin. It looks like they're going to be releasing one of those a week. But even for the coaching staff, it is pretty insane that you would have XL's coaching staff in there, given their finishes in 2 of the splits, to your point about recency.
I mean, they're going to argue that those were the same staff or whatever, but then I would just say this. If it's for the whole year, Monty, then by definition, this staff gets 0 for the first split, don't they? They weren't there. Yeah. There's different coaching staff. So that's why I say the coaching staff gives away the bias. Like, some people have XL number 1 coaching staff because their logic just going off summers. Like, wow, look at them. They went all the way to second place. Here's another one for you, mate. I'm looking at all the people who are, like, having the different angles. How is everyone just fine with Humanoid being second team mid laner? Like, what are we even doing at this point in time? Like, if we were picking players from Fnatic, wouldn't he be, like, the 4th or 5th best player? Like, what are we doing? Like, I don't get it, mate, because here's the weirdest thing about that. Like, using the same logic of recency bias. We're not, it's like, was Vethio not better than fucking Humanoid? Our missus, is Larson not better than Humanoid? What are we doing here? Like, second best mid? I don't get it, mate. I don't get it. The rest of the Fnatic players are good picks. Like, I don't mind them, but Humanoid second, give me a break.
Even in summer, I would argue that Abadage had a really good split overall. Remember, he looked like he was returning back to form, and Humanoid was incredibly shaky in some of the games that Fnatic was winning. I do think it's kind of the bias towards Fnatic. And just based on the voting, it was that a lot of people, I think, split between Humanoid and Abadage. We did see a couple, like, Larson votes, notably from, former teammate Finn. I guess he picked up Larson in the second team All-Pro. But
also technically Swedish as well. So
I mean, what's also crazy is that Abadage received more first team votes than Humanoid did. Humanoid
to where the votes are and all that crap.
Yeah, but so Abadage received like 4 or 5
link me to the ballot.
Oh yeah. I'll link it to the ballot. Abadage received more first team All-Pro votes than Humanoid did, and yet Humanoid ended up as the second team All-Pro, even though it looked like it was very close in terms of the number of votes between Humanoid and Abadage for second team. So it does feel bad. I mean, it does feel bad, and I certainly don't think, given Humanoid's performance, that he earned the second team All-Pro.
I can't take this, mate. I can't actually handle this. Have you seen this fucking ballot? Like, go look at the top here. Cecilia Chiocchetti, right? Who works for esports. Oh, don't worry. They just had Humanoid first mid laner. What?
The only one. What? The only vote for Humanoid first mid laner.
What is that? Also, holy shit.
Just the players too.
Wow.
There are tons that are just all 5 of the G2 players, right? There are a bunch of these ballots that are just all 5 players, or like 4 of the players with Noah. It's
I can at least give them a break that like G2 should probably at least have like 3 first team. They were very good. I'll give them that. Like it's not as bad.
They were more dominant relative to the rest of the field than KT was. I mean, the thing about KT in the Korean All-Pro voting was that those Gen.G and KT were literally 1 match apart, right? So it does beggar belief that you could have all 5 KT members and say that Gen.G has no players that are best in their role.
Holy shit, this is mental. Have you seen how many people have voted El Yoya? Bro, some people have him second. What? I mean, look, obviously the guy having him second is from fucking esports maniacals. Mate, there's another thing. This is why if you don't know, by the way, there's a reason I only ever talk about these on talk shows and I don't make a video every split. Because I realized it's the same as like the Worlds format where they had the group stage with the people divided. You can only make the same video like 3 times, mate. It gets boring. Like, it doesn't matter that the new fan doesn't know the info. Like, I'm so fucking bored of seeing these ballots and then people just vote for people from their country. Like, it's not funny that esports maniacals thinks El Yoya, who, by the way, just had easily the worst split of his whole career, and you can argue, because he's the clear star of the team, tanked their team, and he's the second best jungler in LEC. What are we doing? This is supposed to be for history. Like, also, just because this dickhead is from Spain, we have to have him ruin the vote. Like, by that logic, Monty, can you imagine, by the way? Let me just I'll give you the contrast that'll show you how fucking stupid this is. Can you imagine if I got a vote, Monty, if it said Duncan Shields there, and I just voted for people from the UK who were shit every time as All-Pro? Do you think everyone would sit there and go, this is fine, think about how they've complained about my career. Do you think they'd go, yeah, no problem. I mean, he's from the UK as well, so understandable you'd be biased. Like, give me a break, mate. It's just sad. It's just sad, mate.
Also, I think it does, not having VTO in the top 3. I mean, you just have to ask questions such as
the French guy, of course, Monty, who voted him first mid laner. It's just fucking, this whole thing's stupid, isn't it, mate? Give me a break. Give me a fucking break.
The thing is, though, that obviously Heretics exceeded expectations, right? Within summer. Nobody thought they were going to be doing this well. So you have to have some feasible reason why Heretics was doing better and they were able to make top 4. So you're saying a top 4 team, and we know that the reason was like Jankos and VTO. I would argue Jankos probably deserves second team All-Pro, if not arguably first team All-Pro. I think you could make that. I think you could make an argument there, even though Yike, the thing about Yike in the summer split was that he transitioned primarily to tank play, and
keep going.
He did his job as a tank within G2, and I think that was a good dimensionalization of his play, but he wasn't necessarily as dominant individually as he's been in the past on some of his carry champions, whereas I think Jankos really stood out as being one of the main engines that was powering Heretics to their kind of top 4 placement within the summer playoffs. So I think both VTO and Jankos probably deserve at least better recognition than they actually received as a result of this vote.
I also have to inform you of something else. There are 2 people who voted Peach the second best jungler.
That is outrageous.
What? The one with that one, it's like, what are you even voting for there? You really think he was the reason why XL second? Like, give me a break. The fuck? Why are people so blind?
That is like a troll vote. It's like if you only watched the one Lee Sin game and then didn't watch any of the Maokai games where he randomly dies very early on in the jungle. It's pretty crazy. Hopefully, though, Thorin, since they do appear to be doing season-ending awards for the coaching staff right now, we will get a season MVP, and hopefully that player will be Mickey X. I will be very sad if it isn't, because I think he has been the most consistent member of G2 over the course of the entire year.
Here's the problem I have, right? I hate it already when players do mad biased votes, but the other thing I hate is when the press and the media are people I don't even know and they're doing stupid votes. So here's another good one for you. How about this? Someone called Carver Fisher, whoever the fuck that sounds like some character fucking Samuel L. Jackson played in a movie. Carver Fisher would like the world to know that Limit was the best support player, not Mickey X. I know I just saw Mickey X run the whole fucking LEC for the whole year and win 2 of the championships, including the most recent one. And that's what this is voting for. But no, I was wrong, Monty. It was Limit all along. Fucking hell. Like, Limit was one of the least important parts of that fucking team. What are we doing here? What is this? What the fuck is it? Also, I'd love to know the brain logic, right? Of like, Limit is the best support player, but then like, the only other players are Abadagi. Like, by your logic, surely Odoamne and Patrick are the best as well. If we're doing all XL one, like, there's no rhyme or reason to these, mate. There's nothing.
I'm really glad you didn't look at these before the show, so you could just get
garbage,
triggered live.
It's just garbage.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I was less outraged by seeing all 5 members of G2 than I was seeing all 5 members of KT. And by the way, guys, of course, I'm the famous KT fan, so that says a lot. But it because of G2's relative dominance. But even so, I think it does make you wonder.
The whole premise of what All-Pro is doesn't exist anymore, and now you've just ruined it. That's it. Brilliant. Great job. Good job.
Well, I think the problem with a lot of these All-Pro votes, Thorin, is that many of the members of the press probably are not informed enough, potentially, in order to make reasonable votes, and the players just don't care. So, the problem is the players are just not going to put a lot of time into thinking about these things, and they're requested to do it. But they're not gonna actively.
In my experience, the problem pros have is pros A just don't care about historical stuff, so they think it's a waste of time, or B, they actually think that here's the problem. I don't think a lot of pros even do all pros well. I think what they really do is they just tell you who they think are the 3 best people at the role at the time. Like, I think half of their shit's off scrims quite clearly if you look at some of the votes. But players, I can at least forgive their Monty, because the premise goes, they might be voting on things we don't know about. The press ones kill me, because it's like, why do the press even get a vote, mate? Like, is it just as like a payoff for covering the league? Because, like, for example, why does the shitty LEC Wooloo Pokemon guy get to vote for historical posterity as to who the best players are in LA? Why? I don't get it, mate. So because he was wrong a few times about he just gets to vote on history. What? Like, what I don't get is, I'm not even joking. I don't know now. Maybe now people wouldn't do it. But a couple of years ago, Monty, if you'd have come to the following list of people, depending on what their job at the time was, people like Dom, LS, Papa Smith, they would all agree to be on a panel and vote for this if you asked them. Like, they care about history. They would actually do it right even. So why do we have to have people that we either don't know or just fucking randoms voting? I don't know. I don't get it, mate. Same with some of the talent. Like, in some ways, you're almost setting the talent up to fail, Monty, when you get like the interviewer and tell them to vote on the best 3 players. Like, I don't even blame them if they're wrong. Like, you shouldn't even be giving them a vote, in my opinion.
What's weird about this, Thorin, is that only 4 members of the talent actually voted on the All-Pro, which are Medic, Lord, Yamato Cannon, and Vedius. Yamato Cannon is a very part-time talent, and we don't have Goldborg or Kadrol even voting. I find that odd.
Also, what does anyone even know? What is the status of Yamato Cannon's like contract? Is he technically like still under contract to Fnatic? Like, how does that work? Is that not a conflict of interest? Who knows, right? Is he released? I don't know.
Yeah,
because he shouldn't be voting for this if he's not. Like, what? It's just a secret Fnatic vote, isn't it? And what do you know? He put Razork fucking best jungler. Yeah, all right, mate. I don't think so somehow. I don't think so. So okay, nice, brilliant.
Yeah, but a lot of the talent either recused themselves or weren't asked as a result of this. So I think those people who have been very active in terms of watching every game and whose jobs it is to evaluate this stuff. Like, I would like to see Kadrol's votes in here for sure. It's tough. I don't know. Well, it's a bummer. Hopefully that they can actually rectify some of this for at least the season stuff. I do think it's hard at times to evaluate All-Pro when the splits are so short. You know what I mean? I actually don't even think you need All-Pro every single split of LEC, because it's inherently going to be biased towards the top 4 teams, because the top 4 teams are going to have the majority of the playtime, right? And I don't think there's a way to escape from the recency bias of each individual split when you are everybody's basically just going to pick players from the top 4 teams every single time as a result of the format. So I would rather just see this with a more long view where you do the entire season All-Pro rather than just having it done split by split, because
I'll give you some more mental ones. Here's some more mental ones people aren't going to notice. Because this one, you remember, obviously the most outrageous ones are in the first team and the second team, or if it's related to like race, country or nationality. Tell you what is mental, Monty. Look how many people. There's even one in second, but it's on third team. Look how many for third team ADC have Kazi. You do know they lost like 10 games in a row or something. Like, are we actually going to pretend that didn't happen? They're only doing it for the summer split, Monty. And this is the team that lost, like, what was it, 9 or 10 games? I'll have to check if it was, I think it was 9, but I'll have to double check. And he was your third best ADC. Didn't even make the playoffs, by the way. Like, I don't know what we're doing it on now. As far as I can tell, I get why the esports Mykles guy did it, because he plays for Mad Lions and they're Spanish. But like, aside from that, why are we even doing these votes? It's just garbage, mate.
Don't know.
Like, essentially, if we combine it together, like LEC and LCK, All-Pro just means nothing now. Like, and LCK just means you finished first. And then LCK, I mean, LEC, I don't even know what the rhyme or reason is. We've said there's like 50 different reasons why they're voting. Like, the joke is, I would be annoyed if they only did recency bias. Some of these look like the opposite. Like, how are you voting people for Mad Lions in the top 3 teams? Like, they were that good. They weren't, surely.
Yeah. Gotta agree with you there.
Because sadly, we're actually, by the way, it's going to keep going like this in all esports. We're never going to get, like, what we have in sports now is like the sweet spot that is going to go away. Because one thing I hate in Counter-Strike, people might know this, is, you know, everyone reveres the HLTV top 20 players of the year list. It's like this, but worse, mate, because it goes based on like whether they do shit like in their tournament, they give away MVP, but then they give away EVP, which means that you performed really well, but you weren't the MVP. So they give like, let's say 5 to 10 players, something like that, depending on how big the tournament is. So essentially their list also for real isn't an individual player list. Like they make it sound like it's just, did your team get far enough in tournaments to allow you to get up the list? So it just becomes the same thing. What is the point in individual awards in a team game based on the team's award? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just nothing. Like, now history will never know anyone who plays for a bad team was good. They'll never know. There's no way to tell.
Yep.
And
I agree.
Now
that's the
someone
central
will
problem.
go back and look and go, oh, I guess Peach wasn't a mate. Like, what's the point? What's the point there? There's not even like a Korean. That's just fucking shit. Like, at this point, you almost objectively can't watch what you're seeing on a League of Legends screen. Like, you should just have your vote taken away from you immediately. Because I don't blame anyone who voted. I blame idiots giving them the vote, mate. It's a bit like my view on politics. There you go. Straight fire. Fucking straight
Not
fire.
an unreasonable view. Oh man, yeah. I don't know how you fix this though, because you want on one side you want a sample size big enough so that no one.
Let's be real. You really do have to narrow down the panel. Like obviously we can't control for a giant panel like this because, as we said, think about it, Monty. They're voting for like contrary reasons. Someone's doing it for nationality. This one's doing it from scrims. This one's doing it for. I think for real, you probably want a panel of like 10 people max, and you just want it to be where they all. It's like the esports awards. You all understand the premise of what you're voting for and what you're selecting for, and then you just try and do your best job. And if after that, by the way, people have really obscure like different opinions. Like if after that someone really does have El Yoya, their third best jungler, okay, maybe sometimes I can forgive that. But like I can't do it when then they're just Spanish and he's Spanish and magically he's there. But you know what I mean? Like that's too on the nose, mate. Like you have to have your vote taken away if you do that, I'm afraid.
I think the problem is that you have to actually get these people into a room or into a call where they're all paying attention.
Like 12 angry men, they're going to argue with each other. You're going to actually like debate the topic, basically. Yeah, like a jury. I think so.
Yeah, you do. You do actually have to get the people into a room and make sure they're paying attention, and you can actually have a discussion about this stuff. Because if you don't do that, people will vote with their own criteria in isolation or just submit dumb votes that don't make any sense. So, but the thing is, Thorin, is that none of these people want to spend the time to get into a room to make sure history is right, because at the end of the day, they ultimately don't care. And that's the fundamental issue with the LCK stuff. It's with all of the All-Pro voting. I think there's two issues. One of which is that there isn't this is going to sound weird. There isn't a large enough sample size because in All-Pro, in a larger All-Pro voting, like you see in perhaps the NFL, they generally do a pretty good job. But if you have a large enough sample size, it can limit the bias, right? So you either have to have a group of people who really just wants to get into the weeds and argue with each other for a few hours about how this is going to turn out and spend the time to do that, or you have to have a large enough sample size that it actually makes sense. But the problem in esports compared to traditional sports is there simply aren't enough experts in order to have a large pool, right? There simply aren't. In the NFL, you have 32 teams. You have people, you have journalists who have spent their entire lives covering this game and who do very much care about the history, right? And who do have a professional reason to get all of this stuff right. And at least in the sample size is just too small in esports. It's just too small. And they're not willing to go out. Riot would rather die than put our names or other people's names who spend all of their time working on this game on that ballot. So they lose even more people who could actually be trying to shift the vote into a place that actually makes sense, or who would be willing to engage in these conversations and who would be willing to spend time, because I just don't like people. So there you go.
The problem is, though, like, as mad as it sounds, the LCK one is way more egregious because, like, you do have an amazing sample size there. You have, like, what? 18 fucking best of threes. Like, the joke is the LCK should be the easiest to do an awesome All-Pro vote on. That's why one thing that I did hate was now it just set them up for all those shit jokes, Monty, where when KT lost, everyone could just be like, lol, the 5 best players lost, like when Mad Lions did it, that split in LEC. But the problem with that is that's the fact that they lost the playoffs doesn't prove they were wrong. They were wrong anyway, guys. Like, they didn't have the 5 best players in the LCK. Like, that, I don't even know anyone who ever thought that was the case, by the way. Even the biggest KT stan in the world surely had a couple of players from other teams in his 5. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Like, surely everyone had like someone instead of BDD or something, or fucking instead of Cuz. Come on, they seem like the obvious ones.
Cuz is the most egregious one. Cuz is the most egregious one because I don't even think you can make any kind of argument that Cuz deserved it more than Peanut did. I mean, the joke is the guy from esports Maniacals thinks Elyoya deserved it more than fucking Cuz, didn't he? So, Tim, he didn't get a vote in it. The joke is, here's my really base take. The only good thing about these awards is they show that objectively, left to their own devices, humans are incapable of actually making democracy work. There you go. Problem solved. Basically, make me a dictator and I'll solve the whole thing for you. I'll make the fucking trains run on time, boys. Thorin for esports dictator. Exactly. History will be set right.
Exactly.
No holes in the timeline.
I'm a huge fan of God Emperor of Doom, but I just want people to like willingly give me that status. I don't want to have to actually earn it and battle for it myself. I just want to be granted that status of universal dictator tyrant.
Too funny. You want to talk about some LCK this week, considering we saw a billion best of 5s and we're heading into the finals?
We need to start. We need to start what I mentioned, if people haven't seen it yet, on the Competitive Edge episode where we talked about like the KT results and some of the bets that we're going to do, which is this. Dude, everyone else is laughing because they think like, lol, look at KT, they failed again. Like, wow, oh my God, T1 is back. Like, people have missed. The good news is this. The LCK playoffs look awesome now. Before, it looked like it was going to be an incredibly boring. Like, for real, it looked before it, the only good match was going to be the final of KT against Gen.G. That was it. So I was worried we'd have like 2 series I care about, which is the upper final and then the final itself. Now, I actually think for real, if you go and watch any talk show, you could make a case for any of these 3 teams. You can even make a case T1 wins now, by the way, guys. Like, let's be real. The other teams all look like when they play them, it's like the fucking old Bjergsen TSM thing. It's in the back of their heads, and they're all like, oh shit, it's game 5 and T1. Like, everyone looks scared of that still in fucking 2023. So I actually think what's awesome now is this. First of all, if you're us, I'm just going to double down and say KT wins anyway. I think they're going to come back. But I do think the awesome thing is it's going to be really exciting. Now it also means who knows what the seeding is going to be from Korea. It's like all of a sudden I'm actually sort of hyped about LCK. It's like I said in the Competitive Edge one, everyone for real forgot that even though we're all complimenting Faker for being this transformative, talismanic character, we're not then actually giving him the due that is what he does. Like, yeah, guess what, guys? He's back. And when he is back, they are back to being really good. Maybe not like the peak of what they were in spring, but they're still, mate, the transformation is mental. Like, how quickly they got good again. Like, there's a world they can win this LCK. T1 can win, which seemed impossible 3 weeks ago, or even 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think the danger is that when you're KT and you pick T1, like it's the danger. It's the same danger of picking D plus. You know what the theoretical ceiling of this team could be, and if they snap back into form, that's where it gets really scary. Even though you don't necessarily expect them to do that. And I think that given the fact that Hanwha was on the up and up, clearly we saw them pretty
awesome at the end of the split, mate. They looked way more dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, clearly they got exposed, and we'll talk about why within the last two best of threes that they played against Gen.G and KT.
Let's put it this way, Monty. I get that it is funny that the KT then lost.
Yes,
but people are acting like there was never any logic to picking T1. There really was. I'll even give you another one. It's actually way better, Monty. Bear in mind, if they end up being good, you might have to play them twice. I'd rather play them as early in the bracket as possible when there's the least pressure. I don't want to play them in the massive pressure. That's exactly, I'm playing into their hands if I do that. Like, if I actually think I can beat them, Monty, and I am better than them, it's actually better to beat them now in like upper semis. And then if they can meet me in the final, great. Otherwise, you don't play me again, you know? Because that's the thing I've taken from Counter-Strike from years ago. It's way easier to beat someone in a quarterfinal game than it is in like a big final if you handle pressure poorly. Like, you actually want to play them early in a bracket, in my opinion.
I mean, you could argue that T1 doesn't do well under pressure within these finals, considering that outside of their first final together with this roster, they failed to convert in any of the big matches, right? So you could make that argument, including when they were pretty big favorites in spring and got upset by Gen.G. But I think with T1, really what we talked about on this show was that one of the weirdest factors of Gen.G or T1 was that when Faker was out, it was like the other players got individually worse at playing, to which we theorized, hey, this is probably a motivation issue more than anything. And so if Faker comes back into this roster, they get some of their leadership in game back. Are these guys going to snap back into form? Are we going to see the Zeus and Keria that we have seen in the past? And the answer has been largely yes. You know, I think that especially against, in both their matches, we saw really good games, particularly out of Zeus. We saw some very clutch moments out of Keria. He arguably won Game 5 with a rel engage against KT Rolster, or at least he kind of sealed the lead that was occurring up around the Baron pit. And so for me, like, this is potentially like a honeymoon phase with Faker back in for T1, even though if we're going to be honest about Faker's individual performance,
he wasn't that good.
It hasn't been good.
Games, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't been good.
It's actually doubles and triples down the idea that he's actually having some talismanic effect, because it's not like you say, like he came in and he's just killing everyone. He's been sort of a bit sus actually individually.
I think he was pretty substantially worse than both BDD and Chovy in their matchups. There's a lot of questions I think people have about Faker's champion pool. Like, can he play? Even his Azir, which is his most played champion of all time, looked not very good, especially compared to BDD or Chovy's Azir. Because we can only make direct comparisons to the other players that he has left to play within the playoff bracket, right? He did play a game of Jace earlier on, which looked a bit ropey. He likes to play Nico, and we know that T1 loves the kind of lights out Nico ult with Nocturne ult combination. It's kind of like the same thing you see with Kennen, right? Historically with Nocturne. But I'm not super convinced that Faker has the biggest depth to his champion pool right now. And honestly, we're having to see a lot of priority from T1 on selecting the Azir within the first phase of the draft. So before the second round of bans, because it seems like they're really concerned about Faker getting on a kind of neutral matchup, or a matchup that he prefers, or a champion that he prefers. And so that could be I think that could be a problem. I think it could be a pretty big problem moving forward. We saw the Xerath from him recently into his year. We saw the Corki versus Gen.G. And these were both wins. So if the enemy picks Azir, he's got something. But I'm just not convinced that Faker has the same depth to his champion pool, given his injury and potentially lack of practice, and honestly being in pain, that he has historically had, even if he's going back to some classic matchups like Corki and Xerath into Azir, rather. And once Chovy starts busting out this tank Yone in the last couple games of the series, Faker kind of gets dominated by it. And Gen.G, I think, pretty easily wins the last couple games of this series. You could make an argument that there was an angle in game 4 for Zeus to carry through the top lane, given that Doran was really struggling on the gangplank. But Gen.G is used to Doran struggling in lane and playing around that and playing a smart macro game in order to get him back into a position where they can actually win. And that's what ended up happening.
It's the bad news if you T1. Especially because you didn't win the Gen.G series. You've just played 10 playoff games. I feel like if you're KT, when you do the rematch now, you can be so much more cynical in your draft now, mate. There's so many angles that just seem like they're laid out there as a blueprint that you can force T1 into some dodgy ass angles. Like I heavily favor KT to win this one, mate.
Yeah, I think what happens if you ban Azir and Nico is a really good question about Faker right now. What happens?
What does he play?
I do think that the Poppy bans are pretty necessary if you are facing T1. Not only because Owners had some good games on Poppy this year and historically has been a Poppy player, but because Poppy enables one of the most dangerous aspects of T1, which is that they will go for the 20-minute Baron almost every time, right? They love to play early game pressure. And if you give them Poppy, what ends up happening is that if you are it lowers the amount of time you have to contest the objective, because you have to get there faster in case the Poppy ult hits. Because if they buy themselves an additional 5-10 seconds at the Baron, they will just take it and you will not have any opportunity. So it makes the Baron control much more difficult for the opponent. And considering T1 is really good at finding these timing windows in order to at least force a teleport, if not just outright take a 20 to 22 minute Baron, I just don't think you give Poppy up. It's too annoying. Also, Poppy's extremely strong in terms of early game ganking, and that can set up Zeus or Gumayusi and Keria for a lot of success and a potential snowball. So I wouldn't give the Poppy over, even though Gen.G did win against the Poppy. They did have some ropey moments, particularly because Peanut got pretty hard invaded early in his own jungle. And that's always a scary moment, even if Peanut is one of the better junglers in the world from playing from behind due to being invaded, which we've seen time and time again. Like, he can fall behind early and still find a way to make himself relevant. But it just seems like an unnecessary risk. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the Poppy bans come out when teams are playing against T1. You know, we saw a lot of that in the KT games as well. Just lots of Poppy bans. And I think that's probably the reason why.
Because to me, like I say, the fun angle is you can make a case for all. Like there's a world where Gen.G is going to go back to back. Who the fuck thought that was even plausible? And by the way, if they go back to back, here's the difference. When Knight wins everything over with JDG, everyone could say you have a super team. Mate, Chovy doesn't have a fucking super team. He has a good team, but like Chovy really has, like, this is actually like his time to be crowned like the fucking king of Korean League of Legends. Like, mate, this is like, I looked it up. This is like his 8th final he's been in now. Like, that's fucking bonkers. This guy is like one of the transcendent players. And the cool thing for me is he's going to get all the credit if they're winning this team. Look at the squad he's got.
Yeah, and think about it too. It'd be his 3rd title in a row. You know, it'd be a three-peat going back to summer of last year. And what's interesting about that too,
that as well, there can't be that many players who've done like back to back and back, etc. Like, if you look at it, there can't be many. There can't be many.
Especially because there have been roster mix-ups too. To win a title with Ruler, then lose Ruler, a top 2 player, if not top 1 player in the world at his position, replace that player with a rookie, and then win potentially more titles than you won with Ruler is pretty crazy. That's pretty nuts.
Yes.
And I think certainly you do have to take the way that this roster was constructed, particularly around the cornerstones of Chovy and Peanut, really, really seriously as a duo.
And shout out to the coaches stuff. They've killed it, mate.
Yeah, especially because Score was a first-time coach coming in after his military service. And we all knew that Score had obviously an incredible macro sense from his playing career. But he's really been able to translate that very well into a distinct style that works with Gen.G. And we've seen Chovy's play and understanding of map movements really dimensionalize and flourish under Score's coaching. And that's been a huge, huge, huge part of that success. And Peanut also calling on this team. And I have, you know, as much as people might criticize Peanut's individual decision-making at times, I think if we were in a similar situation with Gen.G where you removed Peanut from this roster due to injury, we would see the same faker effect occur in Gen.G that we saw with T1, which is that this team on a macro sense would look substantially worse than they do right now. Because I think without Peanut, this team really would not function at all.
Oh,
I think
man,
his
this
calling is
actually reminds
absolutely
me.
crucial.
If people remember a few years back in the era when Team Liquid had Double Lift and they had Xmithy as their jungler, it's like the same context. There was plenty of reasons you could have a knock on Xmithy. Like his mechanics also didn't look that good anymore. He had a limited champion pool. But if you ever saw that team, he just made that team run. Like his style of jungling was just exactly what that group needed. That's the same with Peanut. Like the joke is you wouldn't replace him with anyone. Like, think about it, fan. So, who are you going to pick as the best jungler, right? Like, I wouldn't put Kanavi on fucking this team. It's a totally different style of team. Like, who knows how it would work? And also, I do get the vibe along these lines. Like, he is like scores general in the fucking game, isn't he? Like, he obviously embodies the philosophy of how they want to play the game. So, it doesn't really matter. He's not the best jungler. Like, it works for this team like a motherfucker, mate. Like I said, there's a world where they're about to just go back to back to back. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. That is, I think that's extremely impressive.
There'll also be a lot of titles for Peanut, to be fair. People forget how many he's won now. Remember, he used to be in T1. Like he'll have quite a few championships now.
Yeah. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of the most decorated players within.
And he was in Rocks as well. Yeah, he'll have a bunch. Let me
Yep.
have a look.
Yeah, he was definitely he's been one of the most decorated players in League of Legends history. And deservedly so.
He has 5 titles already. This will be his 6th, I think. That's pretty fucking fire right there, mate. Think of all the different teams. He was in Rocks, SKT, Kingzone. He's been in a lot of teams, mate. This guy's been around.
Yeah. He's been extremely successful. And even if he's not the mechanical player that he once was, I think what's surprising to me about Peanut's career is that he didn't start this way. He didn't start as the very intelligent pathing guy. He started as the flashy Lee Sin kick you guy. And he's really evolved, and you don't really see that level of evolution frequently with players who start out as kind of mechanical bozos, but then turn into cerebral masterminds. But that's the arc we've seen with Peanut, which certainly puts him among the top players probably to ever play the jungle position at this point in time, especially with the number of rosters that he's played on and the different ways that he's managed to win titles. It's been really impressive. And he remains, in spite of his flaws and the frustrations that I have with him at times when he can absolutely throw games, one of my favorite players. Because the thing about Peanut that I think fans really misjudge is they will look at the int moments when he loses you a game, but they won't look at moments like we saw in Game 5 of T1 versus Gen.G, where this guy is massively behind and he finds ways to get him to bootstrap himself in the game. He never gets any fucking credit for that. Think about that game last year that he had against Damwon, where Canyon was just ruining his shit in playoffs in Game 5 on the Nidalee. He was playing Hecarim. He was bullied like I've almost never seen anybody bullied out of his own jungle before. And yet he was the one who was able to find ways to make himself relevant within that game. But Peanut never gets that credit. He never gets the credit for the shot calling that wins Gen.G a game. He never gets the credit for being the only guy who wouldn't solo lose the game by being bullied out of his jungle, which a lot of the time, by the way, isn't Peanut's fault. It's not Peanut's. Like, his teammates will make a mistake, or he won't have lane pressure and they just invade him. What the fuck do you do at that point in time? You just have to walk away as a jungler. Junglers understand that you are dependent on the pressure and your team's ability to come help you. And if they can't, you just have to give up that part of the map. Like, there's not really a choice. You will die if you try and contest it. You will make the game worse. And Peanut's a guy that, that can come back from these situations and really win you the game. And he's one of the only players who can do this. And yeah, sometimes also it is his fault that things go badly in the early game. Like, I'm not trying to say that. He can play too aggressively at times. That is 100% true. But people just like to focus on the kind of meme flaws of Peanut and not actually say, okay, well, why, like, how is this guy so good? And what exactly is he providing to the team? If you know what I mean. So I'm a big Peanut fan. This is all to say.
No, I also agree. Anytime anyone can completely transform their game and basically make their strengths like their weakness into their strength is just very impressive across any sport. I always find that incredible when people can do that.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the game 5, some people will say that, oh, yeah, if Peanut hadn't really aggressively tried to gank Faker and gone under the turret and taking those turret shots, then the invade wouldn't have been possible. But Peanut is a player who goes for the plays a lot of the time, and he does like to play kind of aggressively, and it's been very successful for the most part. And sometimes those things are going to go awry, and sometimes he's going to have a brain fart, and that's not going to happen. But he can really bounce back really well from either other people's mistakes or his own mistakes when they're not absolutely game ending, which they are. But it's just easy to remember those moments, and I think it's easier to remember those moments than the ones where he does very well, because it's much more of a subtle stage by stage coming back into a game rather than a single moment which lost it. So I don't know, underrated in my opinion. I think he was absolutely, to go back to our All-Pro conversation, the most important jungler of this split. He certainly had a lot more varied duties as a jungler than Cuz did, especially from the carry side, playing a ton of Kha'Zix and having a very high win rate on that champion, as well as just playing tanks super well. So shout out to Peanut. He can absolutely be the reason why Gen.G could win their 3rd consecutive title. So,
or maybe Worlds.
I don't know if I can handle world champion Thorin.
Impossible. Yeah, but the thing is, after King, who cares, mate? Like, the Sting isn't even there anymore now, is it? Like, who gives a shit anymore? Top lane's ruined, basically. Smeb never won, but King did. Who gives a shit anymore? It's like, and now I see, now I've finally adopted the level of apathy that I'm ready to be a voter in the LEC All-Pro list, so I also don't care anymore and actively sort of hate history now, so let me, like, I get my vote, please. My vote, please. Give me a break. By the way, there's a real topic, actually, because remember, after watching the LPL, like, yeah, there's a world where maybe LNG could have won, but, like, I'm sorry, I do think, like, JDG was almost trolling in those first games, the way they drafted and played. Like, I don't think they really believed they could lose, but they still won anyway. So the real question is, you have to look elsewhere in the world. Like, obviously, when KT was on top, we were billing them, but, like, Gen.G is one of the teams of the few that actually have a chance to beat JDG. Like, there's a world, like, we're talking about this macro sense they have, mate. They can get ahead in some games. The obvious problem will be, you're still going to have to team fight eventually. Like, it's going to be hard. In the modern day, the real reason why I think JDG is almost inevitable to win Worlds is, mate, how do you just play a whole series and never team fight them? It's like, if you could do that, God bless. But I don't know how you're going to do it. Like, at the moment, everyone else has tried that too. Everyone's tried getting ahead in lane or winning the draft or getting some early ganks. But eventually, you have to do the team fight. And when you do that, if people don't know, the real thing that makes JDG unfair is, like, Knight and Ruler, relative to their role, are probably the best in the world at team fighting, and they're on the same fucking team. Oh, and by the way, 369, probably the best at his role at team fighting, like, at the same team,
especially on tanks.
It's like, that's what you call pick your poison. Like, you can't beat that, because, like, in this scenario, think of when you watch BLG play, Monty. If someone catches Elk in the fight, you probably won the fight, right? There's no such person like that in fucking JDG. They just win no matter what.
All right, so before a bunch of LPL/JDG fans get mad at me, I do think JDG is the best team in the world. So the point of this exercise is for me to try and find angles to beat them.
Yeah,
and so here are the angles that I can see.
Yeah, come on.
Here are the angles I can see. So if we take a look at the 2 best-of-5s that they played against LNG and the ways in which JDG has lost games this year, sometimes Kanavi can have a bad series. Now, that is an angle for sure that Gen.G can play into. Do I think that Peanut is a smarter pather than Kanavi? I do. And so is there a way that Peanut could potentially get advantages through better pathing and map pressure than Kanavi? Kanavi also has been very weak at times to invades. Like, if other junglers play super aggressively into him, he tries to fight at times and can make mistakes and actually die and then throw the game. Like, this has been a thing that has happened, is that when he's cornered, he doesn't play very well. And Gen.G's a team that could absolutely pull something like that off. If we think about the way that LNG was getting leads and arguably should have won the first best-of-5, let's take game 2 of the first best-of-5 between LNG and JDG as an example. This is a game where Zika played Fiora and got a very big Fiora lead. The reason why LNG lost that particular game was because we saw them, more or less throw the match. And they were trying to engage instead of split pushing and playing out to a reasonable advantage, they were trying to really hard engage within the jungle. And yeah, that was ultimately unsuccessful, right? And I think that if we're talking about split pushing teams, what's fortunate for Gen.G is that they are one of the best split pushing teams in the world. So if you can adequately set up side lane pressure and avoid the 5v5 team fight with split pushing champions, I could see that as a way, if you have an early lead, to beat JDG. Is it very, very hard to do that? Yes, for the reasons that you mentioned, Thorin. It is really, really difficult to avoid team fights with JDG for the entire game. And you cannot make any pressure mistakes, because if you are not putting on pressure and pulling their players across the map, they will group and they will fight you and they will win. And they will win from 3,000 gold down. And I think that's the main conundrum that you're dealing with JDG. I also think you can't give them Xayah. I think giving them Xayah is a massive mistake. Like, this is just a team that can never be allowed to have Xayah. Ruler is simply too good at this champion, and his survivability, positioning, ult usage is just excellent. It's the best. He's the best Xayah player in the world. And because he is so good at eluding death on this champion, he simply cannot be allowed to have it. You have to pick it away from him, or, which is what, the pivot, I think, in draft that we saw between the first best of 5 between LNG and the second best of 5 was that, Gala was trying to take this away, or they were just banning it when they were on blue side, because they wanted to get a different first pick priority for blue. So these are things you could do. Now, if the meta changes and all of a sudden, the other thing that could happen is if the meta changes and you have to go back to carry top laners, it's not that 369 can't play them. It's that it's not optimal for this team to play them. What they want to do is use 369's incredible ability to play tanks in team fights and zone and make sure that Ruler and Knight have a lot of space in order to play their best game, right? And so if you have to play tank top laners, it might disrupt that. They might be not as good under those conditions. Unfortunately, one of the reasons why Gen.G probably is not going to be great versus JDG is that Doran exists. And he's not going to be Zika in terms of getting leads on these carry champions.
That's the saddest part about the LNG result, is like the blueprint isn't there unless you're KT, basically, because no one else has the top laner to do it.
Yeah, I think
LBL, obviously,
Yeah, I think it's different because I can see scenarios where Gen.G plays side lanes really well and just suffocates JDG out while avoiding team fights. Like, there's a world where Kanavi gets punished early, Gen.G gets a 3k gold lead, and then they play
just
Chovy
gets a lead in lane and he side lanes.
Yeah, they get a lead with Chovy. Chovy ends up split pushing, and they apply pressure and play a very measured game and avoid team fights. Maybe they're up a couple dragons, so they don't have to opt into like Drake engagements in the mid game. So there are ways, but you certainly, as a Gen.G fan, would feel better about this if Doran was better in lane. Like, I think that's the caveat that really gets to you, is because unless Doran has a pop-off series, and by the way, Doran can absolutely have a pop-off best of 5. He does it from time to time. Is it consistent? No. Does he have bad series in lane more frequently than he has very good series? Yes, he does. But if he has a pop-off series, maybe that happens. I just think that 369 is so good at tanks that he's like solo killing people on Ornn in lane or on Gragas, right? And there aren't a lot of people that are going to generate weak side leads for you in the way that 369 can, and on champions that scale as well as Ornn does. That's the danger of 369, is that right now, with the way JDG is
genius it is to have Ornn, and then you also have Ruler on your team and Knight.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, we're talking about inevitability. How are you ever going to beat that team? The longer the game goes, it's impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think what feels so unfair to me about JDG is you watch the way that they play around Knight and their bot lane in the laning phase, and then also at the same time while they're doing that, 369 just gets a solo kill on Ornn. You're like, well, fuck me, man. How do you beat this team? Because it's not just that 369 is one of the best, if not the very best top lane tank player in the world when it comes to team fights. It's that he's generating his own leads in lane with you doing absolutely fucking nothing. And then he's scaling harder. And then all of a sudden he's a massive late gain hyper tank Ornn, and you can't deal with him. So maybe a meta shift is the answer. Maybe we do have to see more carry top laners. LNG, for all their strengths in the laning phase, oftentimes didn't play out team composition win conditions very well. And that's what we saw when they got the leads, especially with big time carry split push top laners like Fiora. They couldn't convert them into wins. Part of that's JDG just being very good at playing into those scenarios, but part of that's also LNG kind of sucked at closing. And Gen.G won't suck at, Gen.G has the reverse problem. I think they will suck less at closing, but they will struggle more to get the kind of leads that LNG had.
The other thing as well to me is the reason why this team it's why when you find out how much they're paying for it, that's like the equalizing factor, that they are paying like a king's ransom to make this lineup, because it almost does feel so unfair, because a lot of other people have had super teams where the players were the super team players, but the way these players fit together is just so cracked. Like, if people don't know, like I said, normally when you have the best player in the world at like mid or ADC, normally the whole game is just right. If we get that one guy, team fight's over. But if you look at how they play, it's actually outrageous that, like, Knight, basically, it reminds me, if people don't know, of that Warriors team that had Kevin Durant and Steph Curry at the same time. Because the reason that team was OP wasn't just that they were two amazing players. It's that they could totally coincide at the same time, Monty. Like, basically, Steph Curry's like an amazing off-ball player, so he could do his whole game and not impinge on what Kevin Durant was doing. It's the same with Knight and Ruler. Like, when you watch Knight used to be the guy where everyone was going for him like the fucking cats and the laser pen, trying to kill him in the team fight. But because now that's Ruler, mate, his way to play off that pressure is unbelievable. He just like holds his timings of when to go in and do the burst damage impossibly well, knowing that like I don't have to go in immediately. And then Ruler himself knows, even though I am like the central like focus, if essentially every little like edge I can get makes us unbeatable. It's like people, we talked about in the past episodes, his summoner economy is mental, mate. It's like, not by default, when you're a player like him now, you do the flash instantly so you don't die. Like, he is just so willing to trust his teammates, and they're like, and to get that like 1% extra out of a fight. When you combine these three players together from the traditional roles, like, how do you beat that teammate? Like, it's why I've been building up this hype of like, if they do the Grand Slam, because by the way, guys, if they do the Grand Slam, I'm just going to call them the best League of Legends team of all time. Like, I think this team is unbelievably good. As a 5-man lineup, it's bonkers how good it is.
I think it'd be hard to argue that. I think it'd be very hard to argue that. I think the other thing that's
it's the complementary nature. It almost staggers me, because there's no way you could have known that going in. Some of this is luck, but fuck, it looks awesome now. Like, now the joke is, it looks like in hindsight you knew what you were getting.
I think the other frustrating thing about JDG is that they don't try and do fancy shit, Thorin, a lot of the time. They just play good old working class, front to back, top lane tank, League of Legends. And
that's a lot of way to win the game of League of Legends ever, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. It's the most fundamental way to win. It's potentially the least interesting way to win, but it's the most classic way to win. But here's the problem, Thorin. Here's the problem that you come up with when you're doing the JDG. Normally, very good teams have specific quirks. Like, we could say Gen.G is so good at controlling gold on the map. They are getting all of the enemy jungle. They're getting more lane minions than their opponents. They're playing all the lanes. They're manipulating the wave super well. They're creating side lane pressure. They are doing very, very fancy macro, right? Or, it's KT. They're running these pick compositions. Here comes the Twisted Fate. It's a weird pick, but they have this kind of niche way that they're going to prevent you from ever grouping around objectives, right? So we talk about, or T1. They're forcing the Baron early. They constantly T1 is very good at controlling the tempo of the game and forcing you to react to them, and that creates mistakes from the enemy team because they're all on the same page under Faker's guidance, mind control, shot calling, etc., etc. That goes on, and so they're good at creating vision traps, controlling vision. Now, it's not that JDG isn't also good at these things. The thing is that they just don't have to be. Because when you're playing a team like Gen.G, if you are an underdog and you play classic front to back team fighting, maybe you can beat them because they're playing a split push champion. You can catch them out of position. The very frustrating thing about playing JDG is I don't think any team can beat them in front to back team fighting. And considering how much of the game right now revolves around forcing team fights around either Soul Point, Soul, or early Barons, it feels inevitable that you have to play JDG into their style. It's at one point or another in the game, unless you have a massive advantage in the early game, that you can force them to kind of march to the beat of your drum instead. But having a team that is just so dominant at the very fundamentals of League of Legends makes the game feel hopeless, because you almost feel like there is no scenario where you go into an even team fight, either 4v4 or 5v5, and you win that. And I don't know if I've ever seen another team like that, frankly.
And that's
like,
if you're going even. By the way, just go watch the games where they're ahead. They absolutely curb stomp people. It's actually outrageous how hard they beat people. And also, let's add this in. We're in the era as well, as people have seen all year long, where the wrong team fight lost just wipes your whole team and the game's over. Like, that's also brilliant. Think about, there's other eras, like I've said in the past, where it's more like Brood War. It's like, you know, you lose areas of the map, so you lose this. That's the other thing. You're playing the best team fighting team maybe ever, and if you make the one wrong mistake at the end, there's no net underneath. It's just done. You lose. You fall off the tightrope, you're dead.
And oftentimes we talk about how upsets happen, and a lot of upsets happen because a team is playing a poke or a split push comp, a very good team, and they end up in a 5v5 tanky frontline front to back team fight, right? Like, that's how you can upset teams. You will never upset JDG doing that. You won't do it. So when they have mastered, when they are a tier above in the very like most fundamental way of League of Legends, the burden on you to beat them is absolutely enormous, because it is much harder to try and do what LNG was doing against them. It is much harder to play out those scenarios of split pushing in the late game than it is for JDG just to walk onto a Baron and force you into a team fight, or to control vision and force the 5v5.
In my opinion, this is why the T1 of the spring never actually fulfilled its potential, because the downside they had is, in contrast to what you're talking about now, Monty, their style was way harder to execute. They had to be flawless to make their style work. They had to create these incredibly artificial game states from which they could not fight an opponent and fucking do all that crazy shit. Like you're saying, the problem is the game itself. That JDG isn't going against the grain. They're playing right into how the game wants you to play. That's what makes them unbeatable. And also, bear in mind, guys, that they haven't lost to anyone in a best of 5. There is no actual blueprint. Like, even the blueprint lost. So in this scenario, they're on some like anime Dragon Ball Z villain shit where you throw all your ults at them and then you're like, oh, finally they're dead. And then that smoke just feels like, what you don't? They haven't even been touched to scratch, have they? You fucked, aren't you?
Yeah. I think it's very hard.
So much on myself. I'm just making the Dragon Ball Z analogies now. He's not here anymore, is he? Someone call him. I called LS. You didn't pick up the phone.
Yeah. I think it's really rough. Even to shadowbox it in your mind, I think you just have to hope that like top lane tanks go away, but I don't think they're going away. And the problem is that, at least with JDG, 369 is playing Gragas top, even in a meta now where that's a fringe meta pick, and he's incredibly dangerous on it. I struggle to imagine a scenario where you can't just like play Ornn. Like, here's the thing about League of Legends. You can always just kind of play Ornn top lane no matter what. He's a very safe laning champion. He literally can just build items in lane. Like, he just stands there and builds items, and you're not pressured in the same way to make the.
It's the ultimate weak side champion, isn't it? Because of what it does to the rest of the team. It's actually a genius design, but I think it's one of the better designs Riot's come up with.
Yeah, I think Ornn's design is cool, but there's almost never a time where Ornn isn't meta. Right, or at least you can kind of play him regardless.
I mean, in that sense,
if you really want to.
It's a bit like Gangplank in that sense. If you're some like specialist like Alfari, you can always make an angle work if you really need to force it. Like there's always going to be a matchup where you can sort of get it to work because you're so good on it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think we did this exercise to talk about just how good JDG is, and even when they've come close to losing a couple times, like they did versus T1 at MSI, or they did twice to LNG. And I think what's even more depressing, if you want JDG to lose, or encouraging if you're a JDG fan, is arguably the first best of 5 was JDG having a bad day against LNG. Like, Kanavi had a bad day in that series, and they still won. So what kind of bad day does this team have to have in order to lose, is my next question.
Also, let's just throw this in there. It's not like LNG are just bombs. They did have, like, the reigning MVP who was cracked out in a bunch of even the games in the final. Even, like, if you still can't win after that, what does make you win? Like, both 4 series, Scout had a bunch of games. He was doing awesome. He was doing a whole task.
Scout and Tarzan synergy is better than Knight and Kanavi synergy. Like, they are able to generate more early game advantages, generally speaking. And that is the strength of this team. But let's talk about LNG. What did LNG even have to do to get to this level? Zika had to power up massively and have an insane end of the season, playoff run, crazy confidence level for a relatively new player in order to go through and like try and play Fiora into Ornn matchups in 369 and generate those leads. Mad balls from Zika. And he's been the weak side dude, if you know what I mean. Like, that has been kind of his identity, and they were really pushing him to carry these games, and it was working. They had to get Gala, by the way, Gala in a Kai'Sa meta. Okay, so
I mean, it's for better than that.
Certainly helps, right? True. It's not that he was playing a lot of Kai'Sa, but you do have to take it away from him or ban it a lot of the time. So it warps the draft, especially when Kai'Sa is, potentially the best champion in the fucking game. So, you have these considerations as well to deal with. Like, JDG did have to ban Kai'Sa on red side because obviously LNG was going to be first picking that if it was available. So yeah, I think there's a lot that was going for LNG. It felt like they were primed for success. And even with everything seemingly going right and things going about as bad as we have seen them go for JDG, which is to say not super bad, but like Kanavi kind of sucked in the first best of 5, they still won. So how do you beat them? So I think it's really tough. And especially because most people would say, rightfully so, that the LPL teams do look stronger coming into Worlds on average than what we're going to see from Korea. I think the 4th seed from Korea, whether it's Hanwha or D+, is going to be terrible, like worse than Weibo. And arguably the top seed, if KT collapse in these playoffs, like KT needs to win the rest of their matches very convincingly for us to even, I think, have a shred of belief that there's going to be any kind of challenge to the top teams of the LPL. Because the problem with T1 and Gen.G is that they have very obvious flaws where KT doesn't really have those outside of not being able to put the other teams with obvious flaws away, right? And let's see if they can do it. I will say
for me on the Hanwha one, at least they have this one upside, which is because of the format. Like in a bunch of BO1s, they could win a lot of BO1s, man. Like people like Zika and Viper, like you can get the right champions and win a BO1. My problem with them is I don't know what they can do in bracket play. Like who are they going to beat? What team can they possibly play they can beat? You know what I mean? Like I can't see all the LPL top teams will beat them.
The thing about Hanwha is that Hanwha will style on like NA teams in particular. And the reason why is because they play the NA style of do nothing and wait for the other team to throw into you and like scale into late game. You have, and KT switched their strategy that we saw against T1. I think you said this earlier, Thorin, but I agree with you, which is that it felt like KT was very cocky coming into the T1 series. They were just picking Renekton all over the place. They were playing Renekton into really shitty matchups. And on top of that, Keen was having a very bad day. Zeus was having a very good day. Zeus has looked good in the playoff matches.
It looked like Keen said to his coach, like, I could do whatever I want in my picks. Exactly. And they didn't even try to do a cynical draft, did they, at all? Come on.
And I think Zeus has been kind of bad at points in this split.
Sort of get it, but it just looked really fucking bad at the end. He was egg on your face for sure.
Yeah, Keen looked bad. And I think after that series, what happened with Keen is that he immediately went over to Ornn duty versus Hanwha. Like, we saw a big shift in their strategy where he just plays a bunch of tank games effectively. I mean, he plays Ornn, he plays Poppy. By the way, his first career game ever on Poppy was in this series. And then he plays Cassante into King and Zatrox. And he does very well in all of these games. He does very well. And so we see KT shift into a different, more front to back kind of standard strategy. And I think they looked much better prepared. But the reason I think why they did this versus Hanwha is they said, okay, Hanwha, if you want to play this game where Grizzly just avoids the enemy jungler and doesn't gank and you just kind of guys play for late game, we will do the exact same thing, but we're going to do it with Zeri and Ornn and Viego, and we're just going to outscale you. Like, if you want to play early game avoidance, we'll do it. We opt into that. We will beat you with better scaling and better team fighting in the late game, and they did. And ultimately, Hanwha had no answer to this. By the time game 3 rolls around, they realize what's going on. They put Grizzly on Lee Sid, and they say, okay, we have to do something early because these guys are just outplaying us in the mid and late game. Doesn't happen there either, and the series is over. But KT's strategy, I think, was very solid, which is just to say, like, okay, Hanwha, you want to do this? Fine. But the point is that to beat Hanwha, you have to do one of two things. You either have to be very active and get leads in the early game, or you have to just have confidence that you're going to outplay their team fighting in the late game, which a team like KT can do, but not other, like, Western teams can't do that for the most part. You know, they don't have a player as good as Viper.
Like, I actually do think, for real, I know people think that, like, Wolf overhypes him or whatever. I don't think Viper is at all overhyped. Like, I think he checks out on the eye test like a motherfucker.
Yeah, he's great.
The real problem he has is that he plays AD carry. And if you play that role, I'm sorry, there will always be some component, otherwise the role wouldn't be balanced, of you can't get all your own leads just by yourself. You can't 1v9 the game as AD carry. You need your team to do something to get you to a point in the game where then you take over. Like, the real problem, like you're saying, Monty, is he's in the worst sort of team for that. Like you said, they do nothing. They just hope that they get to that point. So, like, that will work if you do it against, like, LCS, LEC, but good luck doing that against the LPL, mate. Like, they're just going to run you over. You're never going to be in a position to win these games.
But this is all to say, I think Hanwha, if they go, will be kind of consistent against, because the thing is that if you send D+, like, yeah, D+ can get some early leads, but they are sloppy as hell in the mid and late game. They take stupid fights. Like, they can lose to bad teams if the other team is grouped and they aren't, and they don't have vision control and they opt into some of these engagements. If you go into a neutral, like a mid or late game and a kind of approximately equal game state with Hanwha Life, and you are just worse at team fighting, you're just going to lose to Hanwha. Like, that's just how it goes. That's how they win games. So you have to have a plan to, like, punish Grizzly early or aggressively gank the lanes. Because if you just sit back and just let them roll, you have to outscale them or outplay them later. And I just don't think a lot of Western teams are going to be able to do that.
Which is obviously all moot, because we all know DRX and Beryl are going anyway. There's the 4th seed right there. 4 of these motherfuckers. 4th seed, 4th Worlds Finals.
All right. Well, Thorin.
Can't be stopped.
Thorin, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you are a believer, if you are the ultimate believer that is true, if you are a complete psychopath, and you think that what Thorin is saying is possible, you should be
beyond doubt. Exactly. Go on.
You should go to esports bet right now, because the odds that not that DRX is going to qualify for Worlds, just the odds that they beat D+ in the first round of the regional qualification are 10.076.
That's it. I'm sorry. You've activated the Beryl power spike. They're winning that. I'm going to go right now and place a bet. I'll do it on Twitter after this game. I will bet on DRX to win that series, because that's 10-1 odds. You got it for the memes, guys. You've got to believe in Beryl.
So that isn't even just for them to qualify for Worlds. That is literally just for them to beat their first opponent in D+. It is now 10.076. But if you actually want a match you could win, speaking of this, KT versus T1 is coming up. It is Last Three Nations match of the week. What that means is, if you've signed up with our referral link, which you can find below, you can get an additional 10% profit on your first bet on the match of the week, up to $100 USDT. Yeah, or it's equivalent in another cryptocurrency. And right now, KT's at 1.629 to 2.318 for T1. I think KT's probably a pretty heavy favorite going into this one. So you get some pretty good odds there.
Oh, they're mega odds.
You get some pretty good odds there. And yeah, by the way, if you guys just want to play for free, you can still get the 10% bonus using esports coin, which is the free currency that esports bet gives out. And you can get limited time. So go now. Promotion for them is that if you join their Discord, they'll give you 10,000. If you follow esports bet on Twitter, they give you 5,000. And if you follow them on Instagram, they give you another 5,000. So up to 20,000 esports coin. All you have to do is do those things and then message the mod mail on their Discord, or just message customer support on their website with that information. They'll credit it to your account. You can play along with us, have some fun, and esports coin can be transferred into USDT later on. So there's a chance for you to, make some cryptocurrency off of that as well. It's fun, play along, have a good time. You can outright bet XL to win the season finals at 9 odds. I think we did on Competitive Edge, which is the betting show we do over on the Esports Bet YouTube channel, which you should also subscribe to. Yeah, fun stuff. You can.
I actually think as well, by the way, this bet of the week, this one, KT against T1, I actually think might be one of the best bets we have ever featured. The best one clearly was when KT played Gen.G and we got like KT at like 2 point something odds or something outrageous like that. But this one's pretty mega because think about the angle we've created here, guys. Because they've already played T1 and lost, and T1 already gets insanely bet on by fans anyway, we've got a scenario where me and Monty actually have KT as like a solid favourite here. And you're going to get to bet on the favourite to win a best of 5, like 1.6 something odds. Like, you can't ask for better than that. Like, this is actually a mega angle, in my opinion. Like, I'm super comfortable taking those KT odds. They're the better team. You know, so rarely ever going to get in a best of 5, which is really hard for the underdog to win. 1.6 something odds. That's massive. I think it's a mega angle, mate.
My favorite one was getting KT as the underdog in the last telecom war, or the first telecom war, I should say. This is the one where Faker was still playing. That was great. But yeah, your point too about KT being underdogs against Gen.G, that was another fun one. I think in the rematch too, what characterized this series on both sides, honestly, was really weird early deaths, like Zeus dying early or Aiming and Lehens dying early. There were a lot of very strange early game states that came out of these matches where each team was, I think, playing too aggressively at times and giving up pretty massive leads to the opponent. I think we'll see more measured play. As we said, I don't think we're going to see Keen with all of the cocky picks. Like, for example, the game he got mega clapped as Renekton because they left the Rumble up for some reason. And not only on top of that, I think it's very difficult because Aiming Lehens tried a very strange, like, level 1 all-in when the first wave crashed in bot lane, lost it, died, and then it's very hard to help Keen in a tough matchup when you have two sides of the map that are already losing that early in the game. And so it was a pretty easy win for T1 overall, especially when Gumayushi is able to snowball off the Draven because Aiming and Lehens are doing this weird all-in. I don't know what the fuck they were doing in that game, but I just don't think we're going to see that kind of play again. I think KT, they tried to use T1's tricks against them. They wanted to play the Nico Nocturne combo. This isn't what KT does. Like, they're trying to take things away and use T1's weapons against them instead of playing to their own strengths. So the whole thing was just very strange. It was very strange. And also, Game 5 was very winnable for KT. It was a really big play by Keria that turned things around. I think KT is going to go in with a lot more respect. They also have a lot more film now of what happened, like how the team is playing with Faker than they did previously. Because when Faker came back, T1 was playing against shit teams, guys. There was not really good information there. Now there's 2 best of 5s. Of narrow best of 5s against T1, and also, I mean, obviously they played before KT as well, so there's that information. But you're gonna have a week to digest this and really craft a game plan. And we saw KT come with a much better game plan against Hanwha, and I think that's what's gonna happen again. I think you try and pinch Faker's champion pool, see if you can get advantages there. It's good to see that BDD played his first game on Jace earlier in the split. He actually played his first 3 games ever as Tristana in the T1 series, and he looked very good on Tristana for a player who's never played it professionally before. I thought he looked excellent. So that's another arrow in their quiver. They just have much better depth to their champion pools right now, and you just have to play a slower game in the bot side and just be more cognizant about top lane matchups. And I think KT will do a lot better.
Because I mean, just to really put the emphasis point, by the way, you can see this if you go watch the Competitive Edge episode where we actually point out you can do the handicap bet for KT as well. But I do think like they will handedly win this series. I think it'll be 3-1, 3-0. They'll go to the final. I hope the final, though, is a barn burner. Like, there's a real potential for KT Gen.G to be mega. I think it could be a great final.
Yeah, and I know talking to Wolf as well, he's really hoping that KT performs because as somebody, Wolf just obviously he loves Korea and the Korean region, and KT hasn't been to an international event since like 2018. And so, there's a lot of newer fans have just never seen KT perform internationally. And he wants to, he kind of wants the region to be more than a 2-team region where it's just been Gen.G T1, Gen.G T1 for the last couple of years. And I suppose, obviously, without DRX winning Worlds, but I mean, that was not a likely scenario. And honestly, because DRX was fraudulent and ended up now being terrible, like there's no longevity to that. So for the most part, fans on the international stage have just been exposed to Damwon, T1, and Gen.G for a number of years now. And so having a strong KT who, this iteration of KT, if they re-sign these players, now most of them are going to be free agents at the end of this split, but if they can continue to put strong rosters forward and do well and at least qualify and perform well at international tournaments, it'll strengthen the fan base of the LCK overall. Because right now it's like people are mostly familiar with like Showmaker, Faker, and Chovy, and not so much other players.
It'll also just be wild if like BDD wins Worlds. Like think about that. Like he's always been on the line for me. For me, he's like the gatekeeper, great Korean mid. But like this could be his chance with like a renaissance towards the end of his career to actually just win the whole thing.
You know what's bonkers, Thorin, is there actually is an alternate reality where he wins with Gen.G.
Oh, it could have happened in theory, yeah. The problem is that they really were chokers internationally, in my opinion. They just collapsed mentally every time they got to a Worlds, you know.
I mean, I think BDD had an insane performance at the Worlds he went to. At the Worlds he went to with Gen.G. 2021.
The one where they played Cloud9, you mean? Yeah.
I thought he did. I thought he was amazing.
Yeah,
at that event. And you know, you'll remember that was the year EDG won Worlds, and they almost beat EDG in the semifinals. It was a really, really close series, and BDD absolutely popped off. You know, there's a world where it was a Gen.G Damwon Kia final that year, and obviously then a Korean team wins. And Gen.G, I think Gen.G massively overperformed that year, so we could have already seen it potentially, but not yet. Not yet. I'm more interested in Keen winning a Worlds title, personally.
And then the other angle, I've referenced it before, but I'll expand it. Bearing in mind Yagao also is Chinese. The question really becomes, is this the year that a Chinese mid laner wins Worlds? And obviously, I'm being cheeky there, aren't I, because of season 2. Whatever. Figure that one out yourself, guys. Figure that one out yourself. It's all good. Figure that one out yourself. It's all good. But it could happen. The point is, like, all Yagao could win. Could happen. That would be the biggest blue balls of all, by the way. BLG never beats JDG ever the whole year, and then just steals Worlds from them. That would be so insane, wouldn't it? That would be gross.
I would hate that timeline. I would hate that timeline because like I want if a Chinese team is going to win, I want it to be JDG so that we can just say like this is the best team ever. Yeah. Holy shit, they did the Grand Slam. What a great storyline. I really just hope, you know, PLG doesn't come and thieve a title from them.
It's the reason why last year it was a bomber the way that Gen.G lost in the semis, because when you have a team that's like, to make a narrative like that isn't done in one step. You have to have like the dominance, then you have to have like the style, then the players look strong enough, then it's like they get to this point, like when that gets ruined, DRX's narrative isn't as good when they then win. Even though it was super like outrageous, they won, that it doesn't have the same momentum to it. So the real issue here is JDG has done all these check boxes all the year long. Like if someone else wins it, it doesn't quite work the same way. It'll still be great, but that it would be such an awesome narrative for the history of League of Legends if JDG does the career Grand Slam, the year Grand Slam and wins everything. I think it would be like an interesting, like first of all, interesting contender for best team ever. Like I say, Chinese team with Chinese mid laner wins Worlds. Like it would just be such an interesting like demarcation point in history. I think it also could mean a lot actually for Chinese League of Legends. Like I say, it means you don't have to just only have the Korean imports. Look, you have still got Kanavi and Ruler, but it is different when you let the mid laner be Chinese guys. That is the position in history that's won everything.
Yeah, for sure. Let's our producer Andrew has alerted us to the fact that some news just dropped about the LCS versus LEC qualifying series, Thorin, which finally has a date and a location. So previously it was said it was going to be played in North America. We touched on this in Power Spike a little bit because we theorized that it was going to actually end up taking place in Korea. It will be taking place in Korea on October 9th. And what that means, for those of you who don't know, play-in starts on the 10th. So it is literally the day before play-in starts. And I think the reason for this change is that this, obviously we know Golden Guardians are going right now. We're not going to know for a while which LEC team is going to be joining them in that matchup. But there was going to be a problem where Golden Guardians basically can leave right now. They could leave today and go start their boot camp in Korea. And that was going to give potentially a massive advantage to the LCS team, even if they had to fly back to the United States in order to do this match. And also, if they had to fly back to the States to do this match, it was going to have to be way earlier than October 9th, because a lot of the production crew needs to be ready to like go to Korea, I would imagine. And they have to have enough time to like fly the teams out and then fly the teams over to Korea. So probably it would have happened a week earlier at the earliest, like October 2nd would probably be a feasible time in order to put this match if it was going to be in Los Angeles, to give the teams time to play it and then get to Korea afterwards, because whichever team wins has to go to play-ins on October 10th. So this is all to say, if you guys are confused, that this is a good idea from Riot, and it will allow the LEC team ample time to go to Korea and boot camp and prepare for this match as well. The match will just be played in Korea, which is good, because both teams will be no jet lag, practiced up in the environment that they need to be in, and they can immediately roll into the plans. So I like what they've done with this. I think it's the logical choice to give not a huge competitive advantage to Golden Guardians. Now, could this have been avoided with better scheduling from the LEC? Yes. But we are here, and I think this is the best decision that could be made given the circumstances.
And also, it means that even if you lose the match, Monty, you didn't really, but you sort of get to feel like you went to Worlds, you know. You still get to go to Korea at least. That's something. By the way, you will also benefit from going there and scrimming a bit. You get something out of it.
Yeah. Also, the point you make is probably not irrelevant to sponsors either.
Yeah,
to basically, because there's going to be a lot of hype around this, and they're basically just saying that Worlds is starting one day earlier, and it feels more incorporated. At least I don't count play-ins as real Worlds, but it feels more incorporated into at least play-ins.
By the way, along those lines, if I were them, I wouldn't just treat this as some like, you know, like we've got to just get this done and then we got to, dude, this should actually have like a spectacle. This could be awesome. It's like a one-off cool game. Like, we've all been waiting years for these fucking LEC versus LCS, like best of 5. So let's have an awesome one. I mean, because here's the thing. We had that one last year that was like the Mad Lions versus EG one. That was all right. But like, because it was play-ins, people probably forgot that even happened. Make it like, I actually think for real, you should almost make this like half WWE. You should do all trash talk segments and stuff and have all the casters be hella biased, etc. Just make it fun. Just make it fun.
Yeah, I think that'd be really great. The thing that I'm wondering, Thorin, is when do you put the time of this match?
Oh, because in theory you want it to be the Western audience, you mean, right?
My main question, Thorin, is at what point in time do you schedule this game so people could actually watch it?
North America watches the problem, right? Isn't that what's going to fuck
right? If you want North America and Europe to watch it simultaneously, like, you know, you may have to start this game, no joke, at like 9 p.m. Korean time, which would be 5 a.m. on the West Coast of America and 8 a.m. on the East Coast and 2 p.m. in Europe. Because otherwise, there's not really the problem with doing the 3 time zones things is never good for one of the time zones. Yeah. So you really have to bend this. Like, there's a world, actually, I think, even when they start this best of 5 at like 10 p.m. in Korea, even if you were to do it super early in the morning, you know, it's 7 a.m. in Korea, it'd be midnight in Central European time. So I don't know when you do this, man. It's really rough.
Monty quite acutely know this is because remember, there used to be many years where I lived in Europe and was doing the show at 2 a.m. Monty was in Korea doing it at like, I don't know, 8 a.m. or whatever it was there. And then our guests would be from North America. And then they just got to be up at like fucking, you know, like, oh, it's 10 p.m. This is brilliant, guys. Like, but then we would just get wrecked every episode, weren't we? Like, it's outrageous back then because our triangulation was ridiculous. We're all around the world.
Well, we'll really enjoy going back to that when I'm in Korea for 7 months later this year.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to Korea for a while, guys, and just hang out for a bit because basically, you know, Worlds being there makes the time zone a lot easier, and also I just want to go back for a little while.
It also turned out that if you just look on the timeline, you know, as people on Reddit always tell me, Monty, correlation does not equal causation. But even so, all I'm going to say is when Monty left Korea and stopped filleting all those dicks, they got a lot worse at League of Legends. Maybe Monty, you know, like the saliva of like an animal can have like healing properties in it. Maybe Monty essentially was giving back to the Korean scene. He was making them big. He was the fluffer of the Korean scene, basically. There you go. So
I was the fluffer. That's what true.
You want? Yeah. So if Monty goes back, maybe it's a Korean dynasty again. Maybe they go back to the top. Who knows?
It was was my correlation with the downfall of Korean success at World Championships was directly correlated to the time I wasn't in Korea, guys. I will put that out there.
All I'm saying is, Monty's been promising he won't get too excited about KT. All I'm saying is that they might win LCK and he's going to bloody move back to Korea. Like, fucking hell, okay. Stop downplaying it, mate. You obviously love him.
I was the talisman. I was the talisman they needed. I ward off the skill vampires, actually, guys. Maybe because I'm American. When I go to Korea, all the skill vampires just attach to me instead of the Korean players. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. But
if you enjoy interesting stories about vampires, then you might enjoy The Hunger, a movie we just reviewed today on the LFN Culture channel as part of Foreplay, which features Richard Lewis. It's a film starring David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve, and also Susan Sarandon. It's an 80s movie about sort of a mixture of like a unique take on vampirism with sort of like social fame and veneer aspects built. So basically, check out the LFN Culture channel.
Yeah, which you guys should do anyway, because we've got the Nerd Legion show over there where Doe and I suffer through The Witcher and Secret Invasion. But we're doing Willow this week, so that's fun. That's going to be fun, at least. And we have been doing, we just finished our Cosmic Horror arc, and we're on to 1980s vampire movies. It was The Hunger this week, Fright Night next week, Lost Boys week after that, and then Near Dark after that. So it's been a lot of fun. So go check it out. And by the way, guys, when I say Willow, I don't mean the Disney Plus TV show. I mean the original movie, where that show has been revoked. Doe and I got tired of watching really bad shit. And so we decided to go back to a different movie this week. But yeah, it's been fun. Also follow LFN Culture on Twitter and Last Free Nation Culture on Instagram and TikTok. A lot of our videos have been really popping off over there. So
by the way, here's my analogy. It's a bit mean, but that's in my wheelhouse. My analogy for Doa goes like this, guys. So you know how his whole take might seem really jarring to you, because it's like, on the one hand, all this stuff that already was incredibly pulp, just fan service shit sci-fi, already you'd think that's not really that good. But his whole take's like, no, that was great, but the modern stuff, that's all just derivative trash, isn't it? Like, just cynically made to cash in. So the real joke is this, Monty. I actually saw this is totally legit, like my anecdote. I recently saw a video, right? You know the drum and bass group Pendulum, who was obviously huge in like the 2010, is that right? If people don't know, they were an incredibly commercial group. Like, actually, even though they came from drum and bass, they themselves were a massive chart success, massive tour, right? I saw a video because they did like a comeback recently to do some drum and bass stuff, Monty, and I saw a video, and the top comment for real was someone like, this is the time. I remember when they ruled the world, Pendulum. Course, modern music, it's all gone to the dogs, hasn't it? It's like, I'd get it if you were like a fan like Led Zeppelin. You're saying this about Pendulum, homie. Like what fucking barbarians at the gate moment are you envisioning when all that was holding us back for high art was fucking Pendulum? And now they're not like the modern kids or whatever. Like, bro, come on. The scale is too off on this one. So that is probably the best feature of that show, if people don't know. It's like finding out how Doa maintains the cognitive dissonance of liking some stuff that did have like Wookiees and Ewoks and that, but then going, no, that's art. But then going like, bloody Mandalorian season 2. I don't know about that. It's a bit too far for me. I just love seeing how he's going to do that. How he's going to manage that dissonance.
Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. That's all I'm going to say.
It is.
Because really, if we're honest, guys, Star Wars has 2.5 good movies. 2.5. Because we don't fuck with Ewoks.
If you like those shows, you've got to know, which, by the way, Dora does know. Some of it's guilty pleasure, isn't it? It's just sort of like you love it because you were a kid. We all get it.
Yeah. Which, by the way, spoiler, kind of my opinion about Willow. So when I hadn't seen that movie in probably 20 years, and I thought to myself, I would rather be watching The Princess Bride right now.
The problem is,
it's aged much better.
If you know the era, it's just the bad version of those movies. Princess Bride, Legend, all that classic era of like awesome Baron Munchausen. The problem is, it's worse than all of those. It is. It hasn't aged that well, mate, unfortunately.
I actually brought that up where I was like, I think Legend is better than this movie.
It is. Legend's a good movie.
The cast is great. And also Ron Howard directed it, and James Horner did the score. Like, there's an incredible talent in Willow. It's just deployed kind of badly. But anyway, you guys can watch that. It'll be coming out in a day or two. It's all to say, please go subscribe to those channels. The content's really good, guys. It is really good. And what's fun about doing the watching along with Foreplay is you can watch along week by week with us, and we're actually picking movies we enjoy or at least think are interesting and unique. Yes. Or relevance, like have legacies that perpetuate through film, and discussing those. So it's kind of like a movie club that you guys can watch along with. So I know a lot of people have said they've really enjoyed that. If you want to get more into cinema, we do pick some kind of fringe stuff at times, as well as some classics that kind of inform you about the history of a genre or the history of film overall that you kind of have to see in order to put other things in context. So it's been a lot of fun. We really enjoy doing that show.
Also, we figure you guys will vibe in terms of the ambience with a show like Willow, because it's all about people risking everything, going all this toil, trouble, blood, sweat, and tears just for some little baby. But enough about double lift in the LCS. There you go. Whatever. Still got it, mate. That's aged very well. Okay. Oh, by the way, we should do this, to be fair, because we haven't done anything about the West. I'm just going to take my moment to just crow for a moment. I told everyone, here's the one problem people have is this, Monty. This is actually why I do like the historian thing. No, this is the main problem people have with esports history. They are incapable of looking at the bigger picture. All everyone does in esports is ride last week's results. So one of the worst examples I've seen is people forget when they began. You know, like I just said about T1 there, right? Look, I also thought they would be worse, but people were acting like they were going to be the T1 without Faker, but just with Faker thrown in there. They had no chance to beat anyone. Well, in doing so, you yourselves have missed your own narratives, because that's not where they were 2.5 months ago. They were one of the best teams in the career, and it's just like you might have thought KT was a bit better, maybe Gen.G's like a bit better or equal. Like, in the same sense, I think one of the weirdest narratives was this Evil Geniuses one in LCS Pro. Look at the lineup they started this split with. Even if you're the biggest Revenge fan in the world, you didn't think the team was going to be top 2. That's like an insane overperformance. Like, to me, if you look at Evil Geniuses, one, they definitely benefited from a lot of the other rosters shitting the bed. People like NRG and Flycos were just bleeding out of the arse at the beginning of the split. People like TSM took a while to get together. Like, basically, it was only Cloud9 and Golden Guardians were like their true competition. Even TL was dodgy as fuck. Like, basically, everything was set up to make JDG look good at the beginning. And mate, every, say, 2 weeks, they've just gone down and down and down and down and down. And by the end, this is why I hate that people don't put the context in. The actual story at the end of the split is mad props to Revenge, to fucking Kelsey Moser, to some of the people who like Unforgiven. These are the people who get credit. Like, it wasn't actually in a world-class team, guys. There's no, if they'd have made Worlds, it should have been as 4th or 3rd seed tops. Like, this is not a team that should have been in the LCS final. So like, I'm going to crawl a little bit because everyone else just kept riding it like they're going to be really good. Like, I don't hate on like the squad. The squad did the best they could. I actually think they overperformed. The fact they were even in with a shout to like be in Worlds was pretty good. But I do think people rode this team too hard. Like, they benefit from other people's failures, in my opinion.
It's also that I think people have misdiagnosed a lot of the issues from EG. Like Jojo Pian, it was really easy to tell that he was playing well because they would often
probably his best split ever, right? Yeah.
I think he's certainly an MVP candidate, if not an MVP front runner. It's like him and Berserker, I would say, are the strongest candidates for split MVP. So it was very clear when they were doing well that it was through Jojo Pian kind of carrying these games. He played great. But I think people, especially, and I think it's going to get worse now in retrospect, because Revenge did legit have a very bad series against Team Liquid. Like, he got clapped. There's not really another interpretation of that. Summit put him in the grave. It was disappointing, especially to me, who is like somebody who really likes Revenge as a player and who has been. I've been one of his most vocal supporters because I think he's kind of very much underrated. Not to say that he's the best top laner in the league. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he is a very valuable piece of the LCS because he's a native carry top laner who was on a bad team for a long time and looked good in many performances. And he looked good at various times throughout this split. But you also have to consider the other pieces he's dealing with. Remember that Evil Geniuses has been subbing Shaden and Armeo out in best of fives. He has no stability from the jungle position. Isla is bad, guys. I don't know how to tell you this. Isla is not a good player.
Remember that, Monty. Remember, let's just rewind a little bit. Remember on the first few weeks of the split? No, we were all supposed to be laughing at FlyQuest, like, look, they give away Isla. And everyone was going, I always knew he was fucking amazing. I even told you back then, I don't get it, mate. Like, I don't.
He was terrible on FlyQuest.
I don't get it still, boys. He's just not a good player.
He was terrible on FlyQuest. I mean, he is not a good support. And yes, it is impressive and a credit to JoJoPian that he was able to do very well with questionable mid and jungle, or sorry, jungle and support.
Yes.
Which, by the way, is map control. Like, I don't know if you guys understand the game of League of Legends. Jungle and support are map control, especially with synergy with mid lane. Okay, so, you know, what are you supposed to do in this scenario? Like, yes, Revenge played some bad playoff games. Totally on board with you guys there. Wasn't his shining moment. But he was offered very little help on this team. And it was either him or JoJoPian that was carrying most of the time when EG won. And so I still think he's an incredibly valuable player. And in spite of some ugly games that he had against Summit, I don't hold that against him. Summit is the king of the laning phase.
He had the worst possible matchup at this point. Like, the joke is, because EG themselves had to play C9 in the upper bracket, everyone was going to lose that series. Their real problem is that TL got fucked by an RG. If they played someone else, think of any other team except C9, Monty. Revenge has got a great matchup against everyone else. He has basically, like you say, the worst. The only person who can gap him is Summit, and he has all the resources to do it. Like, that's actually fucking brutal. Because I also agree with you, by the way. If I'm EG, the only pieces you need to change jungle and support. That's it. The rest of the team's good to go. This is a good squad.
Yeah, and by the way, Fudge didn't have bad games versus Cloud9.
Revenge.
He didn't. Or sorry, Revenge didn't have bad games against Cloud9 against Fudge.
No, he's fine.
He's fine. He wasn't the reason why they were losing a lot of these games. They were kind of like team-wide throws that were occurring. And they were developing early gold leads and then throwing them. So yeah, I think Revenge is fine. Unfortunately, he's going to bear the brunt of a lot of the criticism because he did get really badly destroyed by Summit in this series. But there's not going to be any kind of criticism, I guess, of like Armeo versus Shaden and the fact that the rest of this team just has to deal with multiple junglers in the same best of 5 like they did against Cloud9. And it was just Shaden who was in the entire time when they played Team Liquid. But the changes in style have been really difficult. Isla being not very good has been very difficult. So it's been hard, I think, EG. They're an incomplete team. They went budget. They got rid of Inspired. Not a great move. But if you want to save money, it's what you're going to do. And so here we are. They overperformed during the regular season. It seems like they got a place that they ultimately deserved within the playoffs. Like, it's hard to say that they didn't deserve to lose the games that they lost.
And then the obvious one we have to talk about is fucking Golden Guardians. Because here's the problem, Monty. Look, if you want LCS to have 4 spots at Worlds, this is the best news possible. This actually is the team. Look, obviously, there's no world where Cloud9 would have been the 4th seed. Of all the teams that could even possibly have been the 4th seed, Monty, this is the best chance you actually have. Like, no joke. I actually feel like I probably will take Golden Guardians to beat whoever LEC puts as that 4th seed for that playoff game. I actually think they're good enough. But, mate, how are they even in this position? This is such an actual travesty of a split ending to end up 4th with their teammate. Like, when I look back, I almost can't conceive of it. Like, I look back at the bracket even and say, how are you 4th? Like, this team at worst should be 3rd, if not in the final with C9. Like, what a whack end to a split. It's just sad. It's just really sad. Especially because, mate, the saddest part about it is some of this came from the fucking players we've been bigging up all year. Like, Gory, we have been calling you the best fucking mid laner the whole time, bro. And you're just going to fucking blow it like this. Oh, it's just sad. It just broke my heart, that series, mate. They should have been so much better.
I mean, they shouldn't have lost, arguably, to NRG either, right? Again, it's been an issue of all of a sudden the strengths of the Gory River synergy have turned into some sort of liability. It's very, very strange. I mean, he got caught out multiple times in the 5th game of this series, which is the game that had to be remade. If you're Gory, you shouldn't be in a place where APA is able to beat you. Like, we saw what happened with Palafox and APA, and Palafox just crushed APA. And I think part of it is APA's mentality has gotten better. I think he was spooked going into the initial match within the playoffs. But But I mean, this is why I don't have a lot of confidence in APA, as we discussed on Competitive Edge, going into the finals, because APA is going to be in a stadium for the first time in his life, and he did get jitters.
Oh, he's a mega rookie. You got to give him. You got to give him that space.
He came in late in the season because they were having really big difficulties in the mid lane position. But his first playoff game, he definitely had nerves. His first stadium game, I can't imagine he's going to turn in his best performance. And if we're real about what was going on with Golden Guardians versus Team Liquid, a lot of it was Pyosik popping off on Viego.
Viego got fucking wrecked, mate. It was just sad, wasn't it?
I mean, Pyosik had a very good series, and he kept getting Viego. Yeah, he kept getting Viego for some reason. I don't know why it wasn't banned. But if we think about the NRG matchup, like, Contracts is a Viego player, so he's going to be trying to take that away, or they will be banning it. Like, how do you limit Pyosik's presence is going to be, I think, a major topic of conversation. We saw a lot of bad play out of Team Liquid, and they still won this series. Like, Summit doesn't know how to use teleport. He ints with teleport. That's what happens. I mean, neither did Gory, is the hilarious truth, because Gory just had TP up on Tristana and let Team Liquid get a Baron even while he was splitting in bot in the 5th game of this series. And then when he wasn't doing that, he was getting caught out in the side lane. So he was either dying in the side lanes, or he just wasn't using teleport to join his team. It was a bad series, guys. It was really sloppy. And overall, the story of these LCS playoffs is really one that goes like this. Is this the worst LCS playoffs ever, or at least in many years? Because the level of sloppiness we are seeing from these teams is shocking. Like, teams are over pushing when they know enemy teams have TP up, they haven't cleared out wards behind them, and they just die to flanks. Like, we saw Cloud9 get flanks behind their opponents and just kill them, right? Just destroy them. Like, we've seen Team Liquid come with flanks with APA on Nico and just destroy them. Like, why in game 3 versus NRG, when NRG has a big lead, is Cloud9 able to double TP behind them and just get themselves back in the game? It's outrageous. Like, if these teams go internationally, it will be a disaster, because other teams understand which summoner spells are up and what could happen in those moments. But LCS teams can't do it. They can't do it.
Yeah, to me, first of all, the quality of the league. I mean, people literally went budget rosters. Like, remember, dude, some of the budget rosters are the ones doing work here. Like, fucking, like we're talking about EG, TSM. These were teams competitive in the playoffs. They've gone complete budget. Then also, this is the worst one of all, Monty. If you have a team like C9 that's like the far and away best team, they need to look perfect when they're in their home region, because it's the only way you can copium, make yourself believe that they're going to be good internationally. Dude, if C9, because they are clearly far and away the best team in LCS, they look fucking dodgy themselves. Even when they're winning, even when they're 3-0ing people, they have dodgy moments, or players that just don't look like they'll fucking cut the mustard, as we say in English. Like, I've said this in the past, but it applies now as well. Like, in this split, I'm supposed to now, I think it's been years for just being on C9 now. I should now be at my absolute most confident, like, right, he's ready. This is when Monty is going to go international. He's going to match up. Like, if he plays against Thorin, he's going to give him that work. Is he fuck? That's my problem. Is like, some of these players just never made it, boys. There's some players, like, the real thing that makes C9 OP is they simultaneously have Berserker and Blabber. That's what, as far as I can tell, makes them unbeatable. If even one of these players went to another team, it'd be game on in the LCS points. Like, they just have the most cracked out 2 players. That's all.
Yeah. And I do give credit to C9's coaching staff in that C9 has the fight in them. You know what I mean? And they are willing to play aggressively basically at all times and be proactive. And that's like a fucking superpower in North America. Oh my God. But even they play too aggressively at times, throw leads. And so it's grim, I will say, for LCS fans this year. It is very difficult to see how an LCS team is going to compete well on the world stage, because if we go back, Golden Guardians performed better than Cloud9, in my opinion, at MSI. And if Golden Guardians, if Gory and River, the team's biggest strengths, are having issues right now in North America, oh boy, we're in for an ugly world, guys, from LCS teams.
Yes.
Like, what is the world, by the way? Truly, North American fans, are you excited by ropey Cloud9, Team Liquid with APA, a rookie at mid lane, NRG, whose players typically not they've never like made it at any point in time, right? Or they've been bit players on rosters that have done okay at Worlds, like contracts on Cloud9, right? FBI hasn't really shown up at a Worlds in the former iterations of like 100 Thieves or anything like that. So where's the hope, man? Like Golden Guardians was the best hope of NA, and if they suck, like, because they at least have the most solid fundamentals, and they had a good mid jungle synergy that was capable of generating early game leads, and they played a solid macro game and often didn't overplay their hand. If they can't do that now, it's doomed.
I also think that's another really problem. Not only have you got quite a dodgy set of teams at the top who are going to Worlds, but the talent's too spread out across the league because of some of these budget decisions. Like, if me and you just have all the players in LCS, Monty, to pick out of, right? Immediately, we're taking people like fucking Prince and Georgia Pion. We're making way better rosters than this. Like, you could make, if you had to like source 4 rosters to go to Worlds and be good for NA, you could still make some good teams. It's just like you say, people like NRG, this should be a budget roster. NRG should be just competing for like the last world spot. The idea they might be in the finals, that's an indictment of the league, I'm afraid. That's no diss to NRG. They've done everything they can with the roster they have. Like, it just shows that the region is a bit whack, unfortunately.
I mean, our favorites to be in the finals, right? It's not just might be in the finals; it's literally are the favorites. We've already seen this matchup. We saw NRG handle Team Liquid in the first round of these playoffs, and while I think things have changed, like I said, I think APA was really nervous in that game. What's to say he won't be once they hit the stadium, a stadium full of fans? Like, I feel like the mirror situation is happening. He might have calmed his nerves down in the same LCS studio he plays in, but it's going to be very, very different when they get into that environment. And it's an environment where players like FBI have been champions before. I just trust the veterancy of NRG way more than I trust some of the players that are relatively, that are rookies on this roster of Team Liquid being in that same environment. I think it's going to be really tough. I think it's going to be really tough. So we'll see. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it activates APA and Yun in a way that I didn't know was possible. But given available evidence, I find that somewhat difficult to believe. I think NRG goes to the finals, and then I think C9 absolutely mauls them. And then we're left with a position where we have to acknowledge that a team, once again, just like Cloud9 last year, when Cloud9 won Summer last year, we just had to deal with the fact that Jensen was really limited in terms of his mid lane play after taking his break, and they won kind of in spite of their flaws. And then we just had to say, well, this team's probably going to get clapped at Worlds. They got clapped at Worlds, and that was it. I would like to be able to believe in the number 1 team from North America. And it's gotten to the point now where it feels like even the number 1 team has a very slim odds of making it out of groups or the Swiss stage. And that's depressing. That's depressing.
Great time to do a walkout, though. Just put the whole league on fucking notice that, hey, we might not even play this shit anymore. It's like, don't even fucking dare fucking challenge me with a good time, motherfucker. How dare you? How dare you?
Yeah, well, I don't know, man. It feels pretty doomed.
Everyone will have forgotten this as well. Shout out to Double Lift. You betrayed the whole walkout movement, presumably in the hopes of getting your money. And you know what? You know that bonus you get for making Worlds? You ain't getting that. Enjoy, dickhead. Was it worth betraying everyone for that? All that for nothing. Brilliant. Yeah, awesome. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Didn't even make it. Awesome. Great job.
Oh, it's all right. Seeing this iteration of 100 Thieves at Worlds would have been.
Oh, it was a train wreck, mate.
It would have been really sad.
Because the real problem this is exposed to me is this is also why I think the walkout was the worst time ever, Monty. Do you know, I actually think one of the dumbest takes of all time from fans is when they get mad at the owners that have imported players for a lot of money. It's like, bro, that is the only thing that has given this region relevance for the last 10 years. Like, if people had done what you guys asked them to, if we had done Reddit plays LCS GM, we would have 4 teams like NRG that would be completely irrelevant at Worlds. Like, you would never have a chance. Because to me, that the reason why I say this year really exposes the flaws of LCS is because since people had to go budget and they cannot get the VC in to just make mistakes and keep buying good play, you've seen how bad the GMing is, dude. Like, it's really shaky. Like, these people relied on just basically just paying for the best player and hoping it worked out. Like, I I can live with like the Cloud9 roster. Golden Guardians is all right, bearing in mind their budget. Team Liquid ones I'm on the fence on that one because I never thought the Yon and fucking Whiny Guy were any good. But like the other ones are just nothing, are they? Like I said, NRG, it's not their fault. They're not supposed to be in this position. They're supposed to be like plucky team that steals the 4th seed and maybe they can beat EU. Same with like, I mean, they didn't make it there, but TSM at one point looked good. Like they could have made it as well. Like these rosters, it's like the whole region's just in such a bad spot right now. I think they've got to, this is my question for you. What happens next year? Do we really just pray that like VC comes back and it's business as usual? Do people reformulate their idea? Because at the moment, like this middle ground of like a few all right NA players, like one okay import, it can't last, mate. Like we've reached the point now where I feel it's not worth the like money that you're paying for the import if you're not going to get anything out of it.
So here's what's going to happen from what I understand from talking to people. Like, obviously, a bunch of the teams are potentially for sale for the right price. I think the smart teams, the smart teams, what they're going to do is what TSM did this split, which I do think was smart. You get $2 million a year. They got $3 million this last year in revenue sharing. Maybe the revenue sharing will go down, guys, because obviously LCS continues to struggle in terms of sponsorships and viewerships. It is hard to believe, given the downturn in viewership this year, that they are going to have either sponsorship renewals or at least renewals at the same amount of money that they were receiving previously. That is a very difficult thing to believe. So perhaps the revenue share goes down. TSM absolutely, by the way, made a profit in their alleged final split of the LCS. We still haven't heard news about what their plans are or what Reginald's promises are. They're, as far as I'm aware, they are actively trying to sell if they haven't been sold already. But a lot of teams, just ask yourself this question. Like you may be hoping that certain teams, as a fan, you may be hoping that certain teams leave the league. Why would they do that if they can't get a good price for the slot? If they're getting $2 million in revenue a year, what they're just going to do is run break even, which you absolutely can do with league minimum salaries. You can actually make money off of the revenue sharing of $2 million a year from Riot. Even if it goes down, it's quite easy to break even if you just have league minimum salaries. If the league moves out of Los Angeles, it becomes even easier in many ways. And as I've said, I'm not sure it's going to happen. So I'm not trying to put it out there saying like this is something that is going to happen. But those conversations have occurred at Riot. I know that factually. And of course, why wouldn't they happen? Like they should have happened. We could have intuited that they would happen because it makes sense. It just makes logical sense. The LCS doesn't need to be in Los Angeles. A combination with CBLOL would have some really big benefits, I think, and that would certainly be at least a point of conversation on the table. Whether it happens or not is a different story. But if you're one of these teams, why would you not just ride out with your revenue sharing? And so my point is that I think a lot of the teams in the league are probably pressuring Riot to get out of California, set up a different kind of arrangement that's going to be cheaper. And then they'll just run budget rosters and just wait until sponsorship returns. But as I understand it, guys, the teams are very much suffering not only from venture capital, but in terms of sponsors right now. Riddle me this. Who outside of LFN have you seen getting new sponsors? We're doing okay. We're not doing great in this environment because advertising budgets suck right now. We could be doing a lot better, but at least we are getting new sponsors. And from the people I talk to in esports, we're doing way better than most other people, and we're not doing well, right? Really appreciate the sponsors that we have, but it's a tough time for advertising. Many advertisers have massively cut their budgets, especially not only because of the threat of a recession that's been going on since the end of last year, which is easing up now, fortunately, but esports continues to be kind of a bad word. And the fact is, so many of these advertisers have been burned by the teams in the league because they offered no value, that a lot of budgets that have gone towards esports have dried up or they've become much, much smaller.
That story we referred to last week is exactly the sort of thing that actually does kill esports. Like that Sentinel story about them like blowing like 700k a month or whatever it was, Monty. That combined with the FaZe Clan story from earlier, that's what really kills esports if you don't know, fans. It's the idea of that similar, add in Overwatch League. By the way, you think when Overwatch League just stops entirely, all these people who vaguely know about esports are going to buy into a franchise league in even a different game. Like, unfortunately, to other people, these are all like bad omens. It just makes people think, fuck, I'll stay clear of it for a while. So like, that's why even though we laugh at those stories, they do so much damage for like the rep of esports.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably the Overwatch League / LCS League of Legends model of franchising is dead forever. Riot doesn't want to do it either. We can tell because they did something different with Valorant. I don't think that's ever coming back. Actually, I'll take that back. I think it can come back, but the way it will come back is if there's an esport that blows up much bigger than any esport right now, where it makes financial sense, because that's when the traditional sports team owners are going to see that value again. They got sold it with League of Legends and Overwatch League. It didn't happen. So if there's scale again, I could see it coming back, but it will only come back if it actually makes, rock solid business sense this time. And we're going to have to see an esport get to kind of a size in the West that it has never been. China can do this, but we in the West can't do it.
Monty, I can tell you, I made this point in the Four Horsemen. I can tell you exactly how we save LCS immediately. You're not going to like the answer, though, because it's all my mates who are doing the CSGO tournament right now, aren't they, over in fucking Saudi Arabia? Spoiler, if anyone's watching football in Europe right now, like I'm a fan of Liverpool, all our fucking best players are getting bought by the Saudi League, mate, because they're getting offered like $100 million or whatever. So if the Saudis come in with unlimited money to league and they want to make a fucking franchise league, yeah, we could do it. It's just, is that the cost that we want to have to run the league? We have to get in a bed with all these different actors around the world? I don't know about that. It's up to each person to choose, right?
Well, I mean, that's what's happened to esports. When there is no VC and when there is no advertising money,
someone's going to pay.
It's going to be China and Saudi Arabia paying for it.
Yeah.
And people are going to take that money. That's just how it goes, guys. That's just how it goes. So yeah, I think to answer your question, Thorin, about the future of LCS, my hope is this. My hope is that they move it the fuck out of Los Angeles to decrease costs, because the more that costs are decreased around the production, the more of the money that is made in revenue can go to getting better players and teams. If the league stays in Los Angeles, the teams are going to make the logical decision to cut money to spend on the teams themselves, on the players, on the coaches, on the infrastructure. That is what will happen. You will have worse teams. The best scenario for LCS is that they move it somewhere else, decrease costs, try and hopefully get some new sponsors as the advertising market opens up, and hopefully the teams get some new sponsors so they can have better teams. But my prediction is this. Viewership is down. Sponsors won't be interested. Teams will lose sponsors, or they'll keep their sponsors at a lower budget point. LCS will lose sponsors, even if they cut costs, it won't offset the costs that they lost. They cut costs by moving to Texas or Las Vegas. They're not going to cut costs enough to offset the sponsorship losses. A bunch of teams are just going to be life support teams. We're going to see player salaries decrease, and that'll be it. That'll be it. It's in a death spiral, basically.
My favorite part of all of this is the ultimate irony that the reason we got franchising in the LCS was Mark Merrill inaccurately analyzing that what happened was TSM specifically used to take the money they made from League and spend it on the rest of their esports operation. The reason that's ironic is because LCS with TSM will now end with TSM cynically just getting as much of the money from League as possible to keep the rest of the org running as they attempt to leave franchising. What I love about Riot
Mark Merrill is a Time Lord, man. He was commenting from the year 2023. He was actually, Mark Merrill was posting on Reddit from summer 2023, in which TSM put all their players on minimum salary, got revenue share, and then, but here's the horrible time paradox of that, Thorin. That post triggered franchising within the LCS, which then caused Reginald to be able to profit via revenue sharing and then take the money from Riot. So he was actually the cause of his own doom, and he created a prophecy that became true
like
by making that post.
Universe, that actually, even when you go back, you fuck up the timeline, then it changes it, and it still happens anyway, doesn't it? Basically, Mark Merrill is one of those people where his real problem is he's not even that he's socially misaligned. He's temporarily misaligned. Like, he doesn't understand that us mere mortals experience time in a linear fashion. He just appears to us like, be not afraid, I am Tryndamere, and I love me some Reggie. Like, you see him through all of time and space at the same time.
He is truly the most depressing Time Lord. Imagine using your powers for this if you had them. Imagine having those powers and using them to do this. Pathetic.
Exactly.
Well,
And
in
to
any
be
case,
fair, in some ways, Riot Games as a corporate culture is much like the TARDIS. There's a lot more going on in there than you'd think from the outside. You know, and they do have an unhealthy obsession with female assistants.
the difference, though, Thorin, is that Doctor Who gets replaced periodically, but no one at Riot can ever get replaced. We've learned that it's actually impossible for them to replace the Doctor Who main character equivalent. Those people just stay there until the end of time itself. All right. Any more talk about League of Legends, or shall we go to viewer questions?
We can do the questions. Yeah.
All right. We'll take a quick break, guys. Be back with viewer questions.
Right, we're going to take some viewer questions now, which if you've never seen the show before, we source from our Discord. So if you are a subscriber to our Discord, the Last Free Nation Discord, you can ask a question in the appropriate channel. And obviously, it's not just for free, is it? We get some money for it. And as a result, we get to run the company. So Monty will pick some of the questions from this channel.
As esports historian, what relic would you put in the esports museum as the official birthday of esports? The first Brood War trophy in Korea, the first frag movie of FaZe Clan / Optic with G Fuel as a sponsor, Riot's agreement that spawned LCS, Drake's DM to Ninja to play Fortnite together, or Thorin's birth certificate.
It was a mean question. It was a mean question. It was all done. It was a good question. It's not a serious question. It's a rhetorical question. It's all good.
No, I mean, you probably have a serious answer to this. What relic would you put in the esports museum as the official first birthday of?
I mean, it feels like the obvious first one would be like the Ferrari that John Carmack gave as a prize to Thresh that he won in Quake in like Red Annihilation in 1997. It's a pretty good one because it's also a banger piece of. Remember, it has double function. It's not just a massive prize. It was also the Ferrari of one of the people who created esports, essentially with Quake, etc. So it's pretty cool,
That's a
right?
great one. There you go. So it was a funny question, but also a good answer. We like those. As I understand, you enjoy ancient literature. I do. Do you have, and if you do, which are your favorite Egyptian, Greek, Roman, or Norse gods? What qualities or stories they have that you appreciate? Sure. I mean, this is an easy question for me to answer. You want to go first?
It means just basically any ancient pantheon.
Egyptian, Greek, Roman, or Norse, but you can pick other ones. I mean, I'll just talk about Aztec gods too, because that's one of my favorite.
One thing I do find quite interesting is, in my opinion, the reason why the character of Loki in the Norse mythology is really interesting is if you notice, he isn't purely like a good guy or a bad guy. He's sort of like the trickster role, isn't he? And if you notice, he even does the move, which famously comic books like to copy, where you do have like enemy of my enemy is my friend scenarios. Like sometimes Loki helps them when it's the right time, right? Even though like sometimes he's the antagonist. So I've always thought that was a pretty cool angle because it's less black and white than the other ones, you know.
It's also, I think, you know, it's not necessarily that Ragnarok is a bad thing and they know Loki is going to trigger it basically, but it's just an inevitability in the end, right? It's not, a lot of Norse mythology isn't necessarily good or bad. And like in ancient mythologies, a lot of times the gods themselves are petty or assholes. And so you just kind of have to deal with their capriciousness as a mortal and understand that they're going to behave according to their nature. And that's true in many mythologies, but I think Norse mythology is, you know, particularly interesting in that regard. I think for me, you know, the mythologies that I resonate kind of most with. So I have, you know, my last name is Norwegian, so I have Scandinavian ancestry. My grandfather was a Norwegian immigrant. And so as a result, I started reading a lot of Norse mythology, and I felt that I personally resonated with a lot of it. In terms of Norse gods, I have Odin's ravens tattooed on my back. And so I really like Odin, and I really like the qualities of Odin and his wisdom, gift with poetry and public speaking. You know, the stories of him with gaining the powers of poetry are very interesting. And I really like his commitment to learning and knowledge. And he is rather mysterious and capricious himself, oftentimes in disguise, always wanting to know more about the news of the world, which is why, you know, I have Hugin Immunin tattooed on my shoulders. So I really love Norse mythology. It is very fragmented because it was all written down post Christianity. So it's the interpretations are kind of weird, and it's definitely been archived under a Christian lens, which is annoying. And there isn't a lot of it that we have, so you kind of have to put the pieces together. But it's pretty good. I really like Aztec mythology, and I really like the god Tezcatlipoca from Aztec mythology, who is again he is a more trickster-like god within that mythological structure, and a god of prophecy and the god of the jaguars. So he's another kind of more mysterious, slippery figure, which is what I tend to go for in terms of my mythologies. In terms of, I'm not super into Egyptian mythology, if I'm going to be honest with you. I think for Greek and Roman mythology, it's not really gods that I like. It's mostly heroes that I like in those mythologies. So the semi-divine, like the demigods are more interesting to me. So people like Achilles, for example, Odysseus. He's not a demigod, but you get my point. More the heroes of like the Iliad and the Odyssey, or the Aeneid, for example, rather than the gods themselves. You have any other favorites?
I mean, Odysseus is a good one to me, because to me, that's like, he's like Lex Luthor, isn't he? He doesn't have any superpowers, but he's just super smart. That's essentially, which basically is the ultimate meta superpower, isn't it? Like, essentially, if you are smart, think about this. This would be crazy if you thought of it maybe in the context of, I don't know, it's crazy, like gender or something. Imagine, Monty, if there was someone stronger than you, but you had the ability through speech and influence to make them do what you want. In some ways, that would change the power dynamic, wouldn't it? But don't let that get in your way, guys. That's definitely not the way history worked at all. It was just about who had the literal physical strength over the others. Weird that, innit?
I also love Hector. I love Hector, Theseus, Perseus. Hector is super underrated. I also like some niche characters like Diomedes in the Iliad. Yeah. Tons of stuff. If you had to work as a chef at a restaurant, what would be your signature dish? I have worked as a chef at a restaurant, so there you go. How would your answer change if the restaurant only served esports industry people? Well, it'd have to be Korean food if it served esports industry people, because that's what everybody agrees on in esports.
Right. Obviously, this joke is in the game Minecraft if it had a cooking section on twitch.tv, the streaming service. Because if it's people in the industry, obviously I'd just make them poison, wouldn't I?
Really?
You wouldn't make it in Minecraft, obviously, yeah, not in real life.
How about a nice crow?
In real life, it'd be horrific to poison everyone, Monty. But in Minecraft, I would just give them poison. Or I'll give you another dark one. I'll give you the same joke. I actually said this on Side Select, but you'll appreciate it since we just referenced all that Greek and Roman mythology. See, if it's people in esports, and we're talking purely hypothetically, Monty, I would never do this in real life. Obviously, the only real appropriate thing to serve esports industry people would be their own children cooked into a pie.
Titus Andronicus. Very nice.
But you wouldn't tell them that until after they'd eaten it. And once they finished eating it, you'd go, you know what, guys, you won't believe this metaphor, but you've just eaten your own children in future in order to have a good time now in esports.
Yep.
There you go.
Thorin would Titus Andronicus, the people of esports.
Wasn't the answer you were hoping for, but it's a pretty good answer. It's pretty out there, isn't it?
I mean, you could also just make them a crow pie. Seems like that'd be a more mild version of perhaps what you're saying.
One thing I've learned about people in esports, they won't eat crow even when they need to, and it'd be appropriate to. They'll never eat it.
You have to force them to do it. That's right. You have to force them to do it.
Okay.
I have cooked in restaurants before. I cooked in a Thai restaurant.
What is your best dish, though? What would your go-to be?
I don't know, man. I cook so many different things.
What would you? No, but I mean, do you have like a classic, like something a bit more obscure? Like, would you do like beef Wellington or something? There's got to be something you would do as your favorite.
I mean, look, man, I love making prime rib. I love smoking briskets.
Something with smoke, right? Yeah, something with smoke.
Yeah,
brisket,
my food. I love making. Krapau is just street food, but I love making a good krapau. It's great shit. Thorin has brought up pro wrestling many times on the shows. I'm curious. Do you still watch pro wrestling? And if so, who are some of your favorite wrestlers of all time?
I haven't watched wrestling in like 20 plus years, man. So no, I basically just liked it in the 90s. So if I'm picking like favorites of all time, I mean, I was a big fan of The Outsiders, Nash and what's his name? Fucking Scott Hall, if people remember those two. Who else was good? Diamond Dallas Page back in the days. This is when I was a little kid, obviously, like when I was a stan. He was the shit with the diamond cutter. Sting. Even though it was just a blatant rip-off of The Crow, but was a cool aesthetic. Well, shout out, by the way, if people don't know the original Crow comics in the 90s from Dark Horse, check those out. They're good. Who else? I was never a massive WWF fan in comparison, but there's some good ones there. Like, Obviously, fucking Triple H. I like villains, if people don't know. I like people who are like, that's one thing about that actually wrestling nailed, unlike a lot of other media, is they actually make the villains pretty cool, don't they? So you can have like a secondary angle to it. So yeah, there's a few for you.
I was never a pro wrestling fan, so there you go. You guys feel like the kind of people who have favorite military generals or commanders? If so, who are your favorites? Well, this is right up my alley. Do you have any favorites?
I mean, the easy ones, just like fucking Napoleon, Alexander the Great, like they're all just cracked out, aren't they? Like, if you actually like these concepts, what's amazing about them, it's why they have made a million anime like this, is when you read the stories, it's like you are reading a fucking manga. You're like, wait a minute. So then they win this battle as well with half as many troops. What? And then they get, and then the other, Entente power comes in and says, well, we're going to attack them from behind. They're like, but I knew you'd do that. So I had it. Like the problem with these ones, like, that's why they are the best though. Like Napoleon, Alexander the Great, they're all just doing that all day long. Like the Napoleon ones, for real, if people want to get into that, because there's the movie coming up, if you look online, there are a whole bunch of people who've done really good podcasts where they go through all the great stories from like their careers, etc. And like I say, you would think it's an anime. Like these almost beg a belief how good the stories are.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna pick up a book and on Napoleon, read it before the Ridley Scott movie comes out. I actually have been reading a fuck ton of books about this recently. I'm almost done right now with a book about Alexander the Great by Philip Freeman that's been excellent. I read Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. I read a book on Horatio Lord Nelson recently, about the Battle of Trafalgar and his naval career. What else have I read?
By the way, that is also how fucked up I am as a person. That I'm actually a fan of Napoleon, even though logically my country was the one fighting against him. So logically, actually, it doesn't make sense to me. But I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Mate. Don't care. Like,
yeah.
Essentially, I wish Trafalgar Square wasn't there. Do I? I wish that was just a big French guy there. And I'm speaking French now. Which, spoiler, if you know my career, I have always been trying to do it anyway. There you go.
I think my favorite one is Hannibal. Actually, I think my favorite one is Hannibal, because there's something just.
He
like,
means the guy from Carthage, obviously not Hannibal Lecter, in case anyone's a moron. Just has to be said.
By the way, Thorin, I am just as an aside, I am so tilted that Hannibal Lecter is named Hannibal, because I would desperately love to name my son Hannibal, but I can't do it because of fucking Hannibal Lecter. But if Hannibal Lecter didn't exist or had a different name, I could actually just name my son Hannibal and it would be awesome. So Hannibal, I love, because the whole Punic Wars thing, where it was an uphill battle for Carthage the entire time, right? And there's such a fucking epic story about their naval dominance in like the first Punic War and the way that Rome had to overcome that. And then Hannibal being Spanish and then marching his elephants over the Alps and then kicking the Romans' ass in Italy is fucking amazing. It is such a crazy underdog story and of really creative genius and leadership qualities that I just think is great. I think it's great. Also, I mean, you can just tell how badly the Romans got owned by Carthage by the time that, you know, the Punic Wars finally ended, and what they had to do to literally burn it to the ground and salt the earth. That's how angry they were at Carthage, because Carthage overperformed so hard based on the expectations for the time. So Hannibal, probably number one for me. I also love Horatio Lord Nelson. He's pretty great too. Really interesting guy. During Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell's recent speech on the annual defense bill. Oh boy, where's this going?
By the way, I'll just throw this out there. I'll give you a freebie, because I saw some moron tried to be like, "Oh, bit of a difference between your age and the Napoleonic one." Here's one for you, Americans. Do you know how many hundreds of years it's been since slavery? You can't shut the fuck up about that still, though, can you? You know that works, doesn't it? If you're American, understand, don't ever talk shit to me. Be gone, be on.
That's because we have a very short history, you know. During Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell's recent speech on the annual defense bill, the venue experienced significant network issues, resulting in him lagging out for 20 seconds straight.
Okay,
that's
true.
Stream, right? He did lag out. His wire got cut. What are some instances of poor network performance or admin rulings that have impacted an esports competition, resulting in similar crowd vitriol of the subsequently experienced by McConnell? That's a very funny question. Obviously, the famous one that I've said, when the stage cut the internet connection, which resulted in the 8-hour delay between WE and CLG at Season 2 and Worlds. But there have been tons of these network performance problems. Flashpoint, famously.
Oh, tons. I mean, the Season 2 Worlds one's the most whatever, isn't it?
Yeah. That's a funny framing of that question. Have you ever seen some of the movies of the filmmaker Billy Wilder? And if so, what of some of your favorite movies of his? I personally love The Apartment and Some Like It Hot. If not, what are some of your favorite filmmakers from the 1950s and 1960s era? I mean, Billy Wilder's very famous.
I mean, you will. It's just whether you know the movies. Like obviously, Sunset Boulevard, he did.
Double Indemnity, I think he did.
He's done a lot of classic movies. But he comes from the era, if people don't know, when obviously they used to do like a movie a year. Like you have to grind out loads back then. He's got some pretty good ones.
I mean, you picked some good ones, like Some Like It Hot.
Ace in the Hole, if anyone's seen that's a classic one. Stalag 17. There's loads of fucking mega famous ones. This guy did loads of good. Lost Weekend is one of my all-time favorites, mate. You know that one movie, Monty, the one where the guy like relapses and like, oh, it's mega. If people wanted to see a movie about addiction, there's a mega movie. Lost Weekend.
Yeah, Double Indemnity is no joke. One of my favorite film noir movies. I think it's super underrated.
Very classic premise as well. And you basically, by the way, you also need to know that premise as a reference point for many things in culture.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that movie. So yeah, certainly familiar. And what other famous movies specifically from the 50s and 60s era? Let's see here. Let me think about some stuff right now while I look up which ones were specifically in that era.
I mean, an obvious one, Paths of Glory from the 50s, early Kubrick movie with Kirk Douglas. That's a banger. I like almost everything that has Orson Welles in. So any of his films, you can put all those up. Touch of Evil.
Like, the earlier like John Cassavetes movies were in the 50s and 60s, although a lot of that stuff, like, you know, Killing of a Chinese Bookie and Woman Under the Influence, were in the 70s. I'm trying to get the exact year on some of these movies because there's going to be a lot of them that were in the 50s and 60s for film noir. Touch of Evil was 58. Obviously a big fan of that. You know, this is a big period for Orson Welles also. So yeah. What else was he in during that time period besides Touch of Evil?
I mean, loads of
stuff.
Yeah, depends. I mean, his movies,
it's like two decades of movies. It's hard to get them all. Our next arc in Foreplay is going to feature some films from that era, though. So you guys.
I'm also a big fan of the King Vidor version of The Fountainhead, which is from like I think 1949 or something. That's a mega movie. It's mega.
I've never seen that one. Have either of you been into fighting games?
As the main guy, Gary Cooper is Howard Rourke in it, which is like a banger casting too, which is a really good job.
Have either of you been into fighting games / the FGC? I recently watched Street Fighter 6 and EVO as my first fighting game, and some of the most fun I've had watching esports in years. Curious what your experience playing and watching, if you've had favorite moments. I've never really played a lot of fighting games, at least not seriously. Like I played very casually, like Soul Calibur and stuff as a teenager, but I was never really involved in that scene and never really been like a Street Fighter player. You know, like Mortal Kombat was big when I was a kid. But we're talking like Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3, this era. So it was before the FGC really started popping off. Never really played like Tekken or Street Fighter or any of those games. But I do enjoy watching them. And I think the atmosphere at those events is quite fun. The FGC just has a lot of issues because it's very difficult to monetize. And so it hasn't been a space that I've been particularly interested in. I don't know about you, Thorin.
I'm just not that interested in fighting games as a type of game. And also the other problem is, from the little I know about them, like all the hardcore games like RTS games, FPS games, they've just been watered down over the years as far as I know. So if people know the most famous fighting moment ever, the Daigo versus Justin Wong, like parry, as far as I know, you can't even do that stuff anymore, Monty. It's like they made it so it's like less and less and less. It's like everything. They make the defensive rules harder in every sport. So like, as far as I know, they also watered it down. So I'm not a big fan of the genre in any way. Like FPS was always my jam.
Yeah. I think it was also like console esports, and that's just never been that interesting to me. Oh, I guess I'm sorry. I was thinking about the 50s and 60s. There's like a bunch of great Western films during that era. It's probably like the king of the Western era. So like Magnificent Seven, like, I mean, most of that stuff.
Everything, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is all going to be that era, right? It's all black and white pretty much. The Searchers,
or the early color stuff. Yeah. Yeah. The black and white, and everything. Yeah. There's tons of good stuff. Tons of good stuff in there, especially in Westerns. Have either of you been into fighting game? Oh, sorry, that was the question we just asked. Who would you say had the better career between Ruler and Deft so far? Are either of them the GOAT ADC right now? I think Ruler's probably eclipsed Deft at this point in time, which is weird to say because Deft is the reigning world champion, but his performance on Gen.G and then now on JDG, especially if Ruler can win the title this year, I think it's hard to argue that Ruler isn't the GOAT ADC at the current point in time.
I mean, I do think if you want to just go on things like peak years, overall career, Deft's certainly a very strong candidate too. He's definitely up there. The problem is it's really hard when you do this discussion. It would be a way better discussion to do in like 3 years. The problem with doing it right now is right now Ruler's at his absolute peak and he is probably the best player in League of Legends. So it's hard not to be overwhelmed by that. But like if you actually do think of the very, very best prime years of Deft, he was a really unbelievably good player. And I also think the thing that's mega underrated about Deft as well, Monty, is he actually also, if we want to use the example of what we're talking about with Peanut, he's someone who inverted his game. Remember, he went from like he used to be on Samsung Blue, he was dog shit in lane. By the time he came back to Korea and did the KT Super Team, he was a fucking monster in lane. He was actually like an insanely strong player. So I think he's actually got, I've always said this, in my opinion, because obviously there's a world where he doesn't win worlds like he did out of nowhere last year. I think he was destined to be the most underrated league player ever. I think Deft's a fucking god tier player, mate. Look how many years of longevity this guy has. Really impressive stuff.
Yeah, there's both certainly in the conversation. I think it'll depend on results, but Ruler getting 2 LPL titles already, I mean, that's... Yes, he's on a super team.
Now, mate. Even now when he's not even supposed to be in his beat, he's still good now, even though his team's pretty whatever, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, he's great. Deft is very good now. With KT losing to T1, the state of the LCK is starting to seem dire. Not sure I agree with that. Dire compared to what?
The joke converted it the opposite. I actually find it cool now. I think like T1's back, so we've got like the 3 teams can all compare. I think it's awesome now.
It's not like T1 didn't play well, guys. T1 played a lot better.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the chances of teams like C9 and G2, given that Weibo has some issues as a whole, seem to be struggling right now? G2 maybe, C9 no.
The thing I think is the problem with this is where this happens every year. You see Weibo and you're just thinking of all the meme games they lost and going, lol, imagine them. What you're forgetting is this. Think of the players Weibo has. Like, is fucking Eminez just going to clap fucking Xiaohu? I don't think so. Even the ones you all think are going to beat the Shy, right? Remember, the Shy int looks like an outplay before it becomes an int. So, like, you have to get through the int, basically, right? So here's the problem, Monty. As much as everyone's laughing now, is Licorice going to clap the Shy? I don't know about that. You know what I mean? Like, so also, to me, I think even Weibo could clown some of these Western teams, mate. In fact, I think they will.
You have to ask who is clapping the Shy, right? These are some of the best top players in the world.
Absolute best players in the whole world. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, like, here's the difference. I'll give like maybe Summit a chance against the Shy in a BO1, but I think people are underestimating how strong those LPL teams are, mate.
And also, you think LCK has weaknesses, but who is going to out macro Gen.G in the West? Who's going to do it? You have to outsmart Gen.G to beat them. And by the way, you have to do that while Chovy is ramming mid lane down your throat for an entire game. So, I don't know. Seems unlikely.
That's one thing I think's mad underrated. Mate, if you actually look, here's the specific positions to look at. The 2 positions I want you to look at is just mid and ADC. Now look at LPL and LCK. Now look back to LCS and LEC. Now look back to LCK. Just mid and ADC only. Now look back. Like, this night and day, guys. It's actually, mid lane especially, it's really bad now. I told everyone this on the Best Damn League show. The saddest part for me about Europe is this. Dude, our region's whole shit was at least we produced like world-class mid laners. Have you seen the mid laners that are probably going to go from Europe? It's going to be Caps, in my opinion, in his worst ever form. Like, I think he's the most pedestrian he's ever been now. He's just an okay player. It doesn't even have the ceiling that his game used to have. You can have Abidagge, who's never done anything internationally. Who else? Maybe Nook. If you're lucky, you might get Niski on a bad day. Like, it's going to be rough. Meanwhile, like, talk all the shit you want about the remember, guys, for the sake of entertainment, we point out weaknesses of LCK, like top lane. Mid and ADC is still really good. Mid lane especially, they are going to have a phenomenal set of mid laners there. Like, as much as I even meme on Zika, mate, he's going to tear up Western mid laners. What are you talking about? Remember, Monty, if Certus can pick Akali whenever he likes and win a game, I'm pretty sure Zika can. I'm pretty sure he can pop off of these motherfuckers, mate. So I think people are doing that thing where I get it for copium reasons. You're just looking at the weakness of the Asian team and then the strength of the Western team.
Yeah.
If you compare player for player, they're still going to dwarf the Western teams this time, in my opinion.
Yep. Have either of you read Power versus Force by David Hawkins? It's a spiritual book written from the perspective of a former psychiatrist with an emphasis on integrity. I have not. I will take a look, though. I'll take a look and see if that's interesting. Have you read it?
Super specific, doesn't it? I mean, here's the problem with that. What you should have done is this. I'll give everyone a pro tip. You got to give us, what you do is this. You tell us, like, that was like, he just gave you like the basic overview. Like, it's like this. What you do is this. Tell us what to you was really compelling about the book. That might make someone read it. You know what I mean? If you were like, it was like, blew my mind, this angle, like that'll get us to it. The problem is he gave us too simplistic overview there. So like Monty lied. It was like, I'll look at it.
No, I will.
Like, I need more than that.
I didn't lie. I will look it up and see if it's interesting.
I don't want to break your guys' hearts, but this is my one life, and I plan on doing it for the shit I'm interested in, not the stuff you're interested in. So unless you can get me interested, then I'm not going to read it, am I? So it sounded okay.
What I will do is I will look up the premise and see if it's interesting, because that doesn't take me hardly any time.
I won't, so that's all. Well, if you like it, it's good. You tell me a reason it's good, then maybe I'll check it out. Okay,
all right. Well, we'll see if we get that far. Monty, if KT loses on Saturday to T1, I think the roller coaster will be permanently out of commission. And I hope maybe you all can make one last video regarding your ultimate victory in the TSM Holy War, maybe with Richard Lewis as a guest. We might do that. Is JDG already the best 5-man lineup of all time for a single season? I think we talked about that earlier in the show. Mix. They're certainly up there.
The problem is, in League especially, they're never going to let you be the number one unless you win Worlds. So they've got to do that, of course.
Yeah. It's been mentioned on the show that Keen is the last of the Korean carry top laners. What about Zeus? No, he is as well. Even though he is spectacular and an amazing player, he doesn't seem like he's off the same cloth of Flame, Smeb, Shy, Reaper, Maknoon, and Keen. Is there something that makes him different from them? Yeah, he doesn't show up in the most important games. Literally all those other, well, Flame kind of got cucked. Famously, but for the most part, most of those other players, Smeb, I don't even know if I would consider Shy a carry top laner. He was weak side a lot of the time, guys. Reaper, Maknoon, these guys though, definitely, and Smeb definitely. I think most of those players at least showed up in the major games. The problem with Zeus is that he's disappeared in most of the games that have mattered, and he needs to have that carry performance on a big stage. That's what he needs to do.
As far as I know, him specifically, he has always been considered a huge favorite in his lane in every one of these finals, and he's blown up, except maybe the Zhao one. Maybe that's it. Like that. Oh, that was that one when he was top lane. No, yeah, that's the worst part about Zeus is, by the way, he should be in this lineage. He's essentially been like this close a million times, but he never gets over the hump, does he? Like my problem with Zeus essentially is, at the moment, he's been limited to his best player being domestic. But in theory, he should be in that mix for sure.
I mean, you watch some of his regular season games and they're spectacular.
Oh, he's mega, yeah.
Last time I asked about gladiatorial combat, if you were a gladiator or duelist, what would be your weapons and style? Man, I'd be a basic bitch. I just go one-handed sword and shield, 100%. It's the most versatile, provides you good offense and defense. It's classic. Maybe a rapier as well. That's not really gladiatorial. That's like Renaissance, right? Duelist. So I just go very, very basic, I have to say. I wouldn't go anything crazy.
Here's the problem. This just shows you how people are different, right? I want to believe I would be with like fencing or some super skilled, like, you know, like very cerebral art. But like, since wars and gladiatorial battle is just about killing the other guy and staying alive, I would just go with some shit that does max damage, like a mace or something. The most underrated one, if you ever look into it, is actually like a staff, like a stick. Because people think, because of anime, that like if you have a stick, right, the other guy just cuts it in half. It's like, do you know how much strength you'd have to bring a fucking sword down really far and cut a fucking stick? Like, if you don't know, a stick's actually mad underrated because you can knock stuff out of their hands. You can, it's actually mega underrated if you ever look into it. Like, basically, it's why in those medieval periods, actually, those aren't bozos, the guys carrying a cane. Like, if you have the skill with it, you can actually you can beat the guy with a sword essentially. Because what people miss about the guy with the really big sword is it's not super mobile, is it? It's not like a little katana. Like, you're trying to swing this massive fucking sword. You've got a certain range that you can work within. So I would probably just go with something simple like a mace or something. Just smash someone's head in with a mace.
Monty mentioned that he was a big fan of the ancient civilizations genre. Are you interested in the works of people like Graham Hancock? And if so, what are your thoughts about the possibilities of lost ancient civilizations, Atlantis, Amazonian ancient civilizations, Egypt, etc. So I don't know who Graham Hancock is.
He's the guy who did Fingerprints of the Gods, where it's like the idea that like maybe potentially like aliens or ancient civilizations, like for example, like maybe the Egyptians is 100,000 years older, or you know, Machu Picchu's like the civilization of the ages and shit. You know, that sort of thing.
I think it's kind of silly but fun to think about. I enjoy the theoreticals of stuff like that. Lost Ancients, Advanced Civilizations. That's not my jam. Like, thinking about Atlantis as a high-tech society that has been lost to the world is not what I find compelling about the ancient civilizations genre. I'm more interested in like finding historical artifacts like the Ark of the Covenant and having it be magical. Okay, so I'm less interested.
You basically want Indiana Jones to be real. That's your vibe. Right?
Yeah. Or like King Solomon's Mines, like the old Alan Quartermain shit. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I'm into. So here's what I'm into. I'm not into Atlantis had spaceships. I'm into ancient civilizations had magic powers that are not technology based. It's very specific. Okay. So I'm more interested in like these old artifacts having powers that have been lost to time. Not that it was done by advanced technology, but that it was done by supernatural forces. I think that's more fun for me.
I'm not personally into Graham Hancock, not least because I also think his job actually is to be a sort of gatekeeper, and actually even his theories reinforce ideas like some elements of historical history are how they say they are, and maybe aliens exist, whatever. I'd personally go the opposite way to Monty. I think it's the other way around. I think there was way more advanced tech, but that like tech isn't some like artificial thing. All the great tech literally is magic and from the world of the imagination. So essentially, I would be on some like Hyperborean tip where maybe actually all of history's semi-fake and there were all different types and places in the realm you could go to. I'd just go on that angle. But of course, only in Minecraft on Twitch.tv. Saved myself there. Could have been killed there, but I saved myself from the Twitch.tv shout out at the end.
What are some of your favorite what ifs in LoL history? Matches that never happened, players that ended up elsewhere than originally planned, etc. The double bracket KT versus IG rematch in the finals of 2018. I mean, there's going to be so many of them that are like double elimination at Worlds. Like, why couldn't we see that? Like, why couldn't I watch Rocks Tigers run it back against T1? Right? Why couldn't I watch that? That sucks.
I'll tell you one that makes me mildly salty, right? Do you remember? Because people will know the story that Flame trialed with T1. It's worse than that, guys. Even though this is a joke, her original betrayal of Kelsey was she once actually did send me a message and said, not only is he trialing, but the rumor is Flame is going to get the job. Now, if people don't remember, this was when Marion left. So basically, Flame could have won Worlds with T1 and Faker, and that didn't happen. So there's my what if. That would have been fucking sick.
What if Scout had come back to Korea on KT 2 years ago? Because that was, you saw the drama with Scout. I know KT was super interested in him. That would have been very interesting to see him on KT last year and this year, potentially. I
also think, by the way, he actually, in my opinion, could be more successful in a Korean team. Like, he plays the prototypical Korean mage style, mate. I love that style of player, mate. Like, that style of player can work all day long in LCK teams.
I really want him to come back. I want him and Tarzan to come back together. That would be incredible. If the LFN crew had to put together a theater performance, what play would you pick, and who would play what role?
I've got a good one.
All right, what's yours?
It's one of the few players I actually like, and there's a great movie about it from the 70s, I think, 70s or 80s. Marat Sad. The story of the Sad and the lunatics take over the asylum. Wouldn't that be amazing? That would be fucking fire, Monty. That's a
I did not expect you to say Marat
Sad. That is a pull and a half, innit? If you know the premise of the inmates take over the asylum and there's all crazy shit going on, that would be awesome. Our crew would be the best for that.
All right. I don't have a better.
Could be some crazy, like, shaved character eating his own shit in the corner or something. So many different characters. Yeah.
Man, I haven't read Marat Sad since I was doing, like basically history of drama work in college. Holy moly. That's a funny one. That's a good one.
Check out that movie if you've never seen it.
Or the play if somebody's putting it on around you. I think there's probably, to be more classic, there's probably like a fun Midsummer Night's Dream angle here where the LFN crew are all in the magical realm manipulating the mortals and playing with them. I think that'd be a fun one too. What are you typically doing leading up to an episode of SI, and what are you doing afterwards? Well, it starts at 8 a.m. my time, so like I don't know, trying to drink coffee, wake up, and like get my kid in clothes before I wander on out to my garage. But mostly it's just watching games and looking up statistics, thinking about what we want to talk about. What am I doing afterwards? Today I will be responding to emails and going to the gym, doing bureaucratic work. Not very exciting.
I'll give everyone like a look, because I like to break the fourth wall on this stuff. I'll give everyone a little pro tip for talk shows. It's actually a mistake, in my opinion, to make your points too specific and make notes about everything. Because if you do that, most people aren't capable of sort of killing their darlings and letting the research die. So if they do that, they're going to force all of those topics to be in the talk show. Whereas basically, like Monty says, I prefer to just watch the games, maybe think as I'm watching them sort of passively about them. And then I'm just going to see on the talk show what's interesting to talk about, and then we're just going to go from that, and that'll be the guide. Because sometimes you come in and you think we're going to talk this, that. Sometimes it's just not interesting, or it doesn't make sense in the conversation. So to me, I think that's the part people miss. They probably think we like put loads of prep in, but it's like I've always said about esports. The best prep is you just live the esport. Like you're just watching it, you're thinking about it, you're reading it. So essentially, you're always going to have there's always going to be something to spur conversation.
Yeah, I also find that now that SI is my third and final talk show every week about League of Legends, that I've spent several days like Monty and Wolf Show and Power Spike thinking and talking about the games that happened this week already. So it helps me like kind of this is kind of like the finalization of my thoughts of a week, where I'm able to start, if I feel like we haven't gotten to a specific topic or Thorin brings up something interesting, then we can talk more at length about this. This is also the longest show, so there's just more time to kind of do comparisons between regions here and discuss meta points. Also, we bring up topics on this show that are not discussed elsewhere because, some of our colleagues may have relationships with riots that prevent them from engaging in certain lines of conversation as much as we might want to do on this show. So it's a good opportunity to do that as well. More, I think Summoning Insight tends to be more long form, more timeless, more, abstract conversations than some of the other shows.
To me, here's the difference. Summoning Insight, in some ways, for the community, plays the role, like you're saying, of the by the numbers used to in CSGO, where these shows are actually necessary for the reason you just said. Like on Best Damn League Show, I'm sure we have some great conversations about the meta in European League of Legends, but it's very rare there's an episode where you'd actually say, like, that was really important in the history of esports. Summoning Insight has had some fucking bangers over the year. I think some of the topics we talked about just this year that no one else can even address, or they go, I'm waiting for the investigation, and there's nothing, never get talked about. So yeah, I think that's the other thing with this show. I actually also think personally, I consciously do think we have like not like a responsibility as in we owe people, but I think there's a responsibility that we're some of the only people who can talk about that. So that's why we do it. That's why we take it on. Like, people don't know this, Monty. There are certain topics where it's like, you're just going to get shit if you talk about it. But I tell you what, if no one else is going to, and I do think it's important, then sometimes I do think it's necessary to do it, even if you have to sort of take it on the chin,
Yep. I've listened to a lot of the Thor Inquiry series. Thor Inquiry, sorry.
The side channel interview series I have.
Yes. Yeah. And I was wondering, without going too deep, of course, if Monty goes as far on the conspiracy/esoteric stuff as Thorin does. Side note, Thor Inquiry is a great series and has opened my eyes to a lot of topics and interest I otherwise would not have been aware of. So thanks for that. In terms of esoteric shit, I mean, Thorin and I have always shared that interest and, bounced books back and forth. You guys, I've talked about this before. I spent a year of my life doing a Mayan adulthood initiation, guys. Okay, so I'm pretty deep into like ancient mysticism. My college degree was in kind of mythology and oral tradition storytelling. My undergraduate thesis.
Your interest is more in like the academic side, though, because when he's saying that, like what I've hinted at in some of these interviews is like I'm quite into like the conspiracy side, which is obviously in some cases by definition not academic, but you're more in sort of like the literature culture of these things, right?
I mean, I also lived it in very interesting ways. Like I have lived the esoteric mystic ceremonies, you know what I mean? And I've lived entire years of my life around that, engaging in this, not in an academic sense, but in a living a mystic tradition sense. So I would say it's pretty, I do enjoy the academic side, but I also have lived the practice side of it, right? So, I mean, I'm pretty deep into a lot of that stuff. I just don't tend to talk about it a lot.
No, I mean more academic in the sense of like you are into like esoteric stuff that has like a historical basis, whereas he's meaning sort of, are you into like conspiracy shit, which like that isn't really your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting to think about, but yeah, for the most part, I'm more into like ancient civilizations and mythology and stories. Like I said, I was about to say my undergraduate thesis was in like it was in alchemical symbolism in Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, which is a Grail legend poem, right? And so I guess here's a weird take for you. That is a conspiracy that I think existed, like the conspiracy of embedding mysticism regarding like very non-Christian mysticism within a supposedly Christian text. So maybe I'm into like ancient conspiracies. I don't know. But I love Carl Jung and Mircea Eliade and these kind of, Joseph Campbell, this kind of stuff. So super into ancient mystic traditions and the hidden codes within, especially Christian texts, for non-Christian metaphysical ideas.
All I would say is this: people do this thing where in the modern day, people try to defend me by doing that argument that goes like, well, you've got to separate the artist from the art, like someone can think these things, but then be very good. No, I go the other way, Monty. I think it's the opposite. I think actually, if you're one of the people who acknowledge like, well, yeah, I mean, Lewis and Thorin are like really good at their job and never wrong and always nail it and get all the corrupt people and expose all that wrong. But, the things they think ideologically and separately have no bearing on that. What are you talking? It's the other way around you. That informs that. So what I would say is this: the reason why, if people don't understand, why are you interested in things like conspiracy? Have you noticed how in my career I've exposed in every layer of the industry it is riddled with conspiracies you don't know about, and people constantly acting for certain motivations and ends that no one knows until it is exposed. Like, the joke is, and this has been my real experience of esports, what I realized from esports is it is just a microcosm of what all industries in the world are like, and they are all filled with corruption. The joke is this, right? There is actual literal conspiracy and corruption, but even on like the less serious side, the thing people always complain about is corruption. It's like, oh, but it's just people who like know each other who get the gig. No, that's just fucking social dynamics, guys. Like, that's an area I feel like nerds have really missed. That's not even corrupt. Like, of course you hire people you know and you trust and you can vibe with and have similar thoughts to you. Like, that just makes sense. So yeah, if people ever wonder why are you into all that, like, have you looked at my career? Like, if I hadn't revealed some of the things I know, what would you think about esports? You'd have a very rosy tinted glasses view of it, wouldn't you? So all I'll say is, in like every area, it's like I always bring it back to this. When people tell Richard, they was like, why are you always so negative? It's like his job essentially is find rapists, murderers, and people who steal. Like, what do you think? It'd be a pretty perfect world if he's having an awesome day, wouldn't it? Like, there's a lot of darkness in the world, guys, basically. If you journalism pull on the thread, it unravels the whole thing.
Journalism fucks you up, man. Like, I come from a family of journalists. My grandfather helped pioneer the Freedom of Information Act in the United States to get the government to release information that they didn't want released. He was the executive editor of a newspaper called the Oakland Tribune, which is in the Bay Area. He was a very important journalist of his era. And he was extremely pessimistic. As it turns out, when you're constantly covering this stuff and this is your entire life, it changes the way you think about things. And I had a great grandfather, brilliant man, and did a lot of, I think, good for society and good for American journalism. But certainly, he certainly was, wary. Let's put it that. He was a wary man. All right, let's go on. What are the egregiously wrong takes, if any, that you have taken which stand out in your minds and still cringe about?
I mean, I could give you two right now. How about this one? XL will be the best team at the beginning of this year. It's pretty good.
We both had that take.
Yeah. And then I also did, back in season 5, have the take. Fnatic lost the off-season. A split later, they had the first perfect split in history. So, all right. Those were two.
And probably a bunch of mine about Overwatch League. There are probably a bunch of them in there about that one.
And also, spoiler, you did pick KT a lot in history. They did only win once ever. So
some of it was for memes, but yeah, some of it was for memes. But yeah, KT, my love of KT, constantly let down by the Razor Cake. I know you have opinions on this one, Thorin. What do you think of David Foster Wallace?
Here's the problem. I've never really understood why people think his books are boring or bad. I do think that they're hard to read because that style where you have to keep referring to the footnotes is just a bit like, it's not very like intuitive essentially. But I actually personally find that really interesting. Like I actually find his footnote style is really like, it actually adds more info. Like it's a bit nerdy and autistic, but if you vibe with it, it's a really unique way of writing. And I do think his essays are fucking amazing. I think he's a fabulous essay writer.
I think his sports writing is fucking crazy good. Like his writing on tennis that I've read, I've really enjoyed, despite not even being a tennis fan. I really struggle with his fiction. I find Infinite Jest unreadable. And it's not because I think it's a bad book. It's because I hate his kind of postmodern fiction. Okay. His pessimism and modernity is something that I cannot stand. And I've talked a little bit about this with Dostoevsky about being too kind of myopic and psychological for me. It's not that I think that Dostoevsky is a bad writer. I think he's a very important writer. I just don't like Dostoevsky. And I just don't like David Foster Wallace because the things that he chooses to write about are not the kind of mystic, transcendental themes, like eternal themes that I gravitate to. He's basically the antithesis of classic mythology. So I don't like him. But I understand that he's good and I understand that he's brilliant and I appreciate his intellect, but it's just it's not my taste. It's not my taste. Apart from breaking Faker's arm, did you get any response from the Big Dick Energy Awards you guys gave out? No, we gave them to fans too. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun to do. We enjoyed that. But no, I haven't heard from the players or anything. I can't recall if the name has been brought up in past episodes, but have either of you read any Kierkegaard? Not in a long time. And if so, what's your favorite work by him? I mostly read excerpts in college, so I can't recall specifically which aspects of Kierkegaard. He's certainly not somebody like Nietzsche that I've been super invested in as a whole.
No, this is not someone I've read like the primary work of. It's more like these are the sorts of people where I like to read books by people who are like syncretists who draw together ideas from different people. And I just found some of the interesting ideas. Like, for example, some of his Christian ideas are quite interesting. He's quite a unique thinker.
If you could pick any player that has ever played for a certain org and you could choose his form by year, but you can't take more than one player for each year, what is God damn it. Okay. What is the best team/org of all time? So if you could pick any player that has ever played for a certain org and you could choose his form by year, but you can't take more than one player for each year, what is the best team of all time? So basically, which team has had the most consistency over the years?
Is that what it meant? I thought it was like a rework of what they've had on the past ones of like you just pick the best year of the top one and put him in a super
we have to take one. We can only take it's one team. So let's say we take Cloud9 and we would have to take like 2013 Meteos, but we couldn't take anybody else from 2013, but we could take 2023 Berserker and put him on Cloud9. So it'd have to be one roster. So what would be the best?
T1 already right out the gate. T1 would be a strong contender, aren't they? So yeah. That's pretty good right there. Because the real problem is this. The reason why it's probably going to be T1 is because most other teams don't have the longevity. Like in the modern day, T1 have some awesome players, but like it only goes like, what, 5 years back? You know what I mean? Whereas T1,
I mean, EDG is kind of a good contender.
That's a pretty good one too.
EDG is actually a good contender, but the problem would be EDG had a couple good years. Like you could take 2015 Deft, for example.
I mean, they had Viper last year, but I guess.
And then you could take, Viper last year.
And then 2021 or whatever, when they won Worlds, they had Viper.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Viper was
a pretty good team. They have Scout, obviously. He was mega. They have old school fucking Clearlove. Yeah. EDG is a good shout too. That's a good
EDG
shout.
would probably be a pretty good one. EDG, but T1 would be a good one. I think with the number of years
could possibly do.
RNG would be a good one. The number of players you could probably do on Dom1 as well. Because you could pick Deft this year, and then you could pick 2 different years of you could pick Noguri for the year that they won. You could pick 2 different years for Canyon and Showmaker.
Obviously, the Western one's easy. You just do G2, innit? You don't have to do just the same year. 2019, innit? There you go. Problem solved.
Well, but you'd have to pick different players. Like, that's the whole thing is we have to take.
You can still do a pretty good one for that one because you can obviously have old school perks and stuff. Can't you?
I mean, Cloud9 is the obvious one as well for North America. Oh, Team Liquid would probably be pretty good too.
Anyone except TSM, basically.
So are we waiting to see what will happen first? Riot implodes, killing League and summoning Insight, or Riot makes fans pay for tournaments? My delusional grand plan was for Shaq, a rich person, to buy Riot from Tencent, hire U2 and LS to run the game kingdom and make fans pay. China will say aliens canceled LPL, so LPL players will move back to LCK, and maybe China and Saudi economy collapses. No, it won't collapse. Again, the buck will just be passed on to whoever wants to pay for it, and that'll probably like China and Saudi Arabia. I don't think League will collapse. If Riot gets bored of running it, either Tencent will take control of it worldwide. The Saudis will take control of it worldwide. Like, they'll just give it to ESL, right? Why would you stop it when you can just hand it off to ESL?
Yeah, basically, as a last option, having someone else white label, it's always the obvious thing you'd do.
Yeah. And trust me, really. ESL would love to be able to do the League of Legends competitive circuit. Honestly, might be better.
Might be, yeah. Their events are good.
I don't know if I hate it. Honestly. I think it would be very interesting.
I mean, you could make a bunch of arguments. It would be better, Monty. Like, the event itself would be better. The production's probably
the format would be
good.
Better.
They might even do better talent hires. Like, what wouldn't be good? Yeah, it could be awesome. Unironically.
Yeah. Rewind to 2014. KT keeps Rookie. Oh my God, this is my wet dream. All right, let's go. And making him and Score their franchise players for the next 6 years. Oh, I'm coming. Predict how the next 6 years of history unfold. Obviously, like, KT wins some titles in that realm.
Yeah.
Like,
eventually they would have. Come on. Eventually.
Yeah, that's an incredibly strong core. And Score was on a lot of teams between 2014 and 2017. Even 2017, the KT Super Team was a massive disappointment. They didn't even make Worlds. So it really took until 2018 for Score to get anywhere.
And just look at the players, right? Score was working with cocksuckers like fucking Nagnate and Fly. Meanwhile,
and he was making finals.
Rookie was working with fucking Ning. Like, give me a break. Like the worst thing is these guys desperately need each other. Like, together they would be fucking cracked out. They would be amazing, wouldn't they?
Yeah, that would have solved a lot of problems.
For this is crazier than you realize, guys, because bear in mind that was the down year of T1. If Rookie doesn't leave and he still progresses to become as great a player, the whole T1 dynasty's on the table. Remember, they only just survived Rocks. Like, if you had KT with Rookie as well, and Score, maybe Deft himself comes back later, like, mate, Korea would have been amazing. Low-key, that really is the biggest what-if ever. It's just, what if all the best Koreans have to stay in LCK? That is the what-if.
And also, imagine the number of.
I don't mind if you want to have imports. You can have gory, and you can have the questionable ones. But all the best Koreans, I want them in LCK. I want to see what would happen if you had 5-6 teams. Because think about it, mate. You could have had an era where all these players are active at the same time, like Rookie, Faker, Scout, Chovy, BDD. Like, mate, this would be the most bonkers fucking talent imaginable. The joke is, the teams that don't make worlds would have potential world champion players just in their starting lineup.
I think what is so crazy about this too is that we could have gotten multiple years of Prime, Faker, and Rookie just constantly playing against each other.
In the finals like 5 times, right? Yeah.
Fucking lame, man. Fucking lame. What would be your desert island disc? A single album you could listen to if stranded on a desert island.
What's the go-to for this? Because the reason why I prefer this sort of question to what is your favorite is I have the same thing. If someone asks me like what the best movie is, Monty, I might pick a movie that I only watched once and might never watch again. But if you do favorite, it has to be the one you can just watch a million times, isn't it? So I actually think the one you watch a million times is way more telling of who you are as a person. So basically, what album could you just listen to forever and never get bored? What would it be for you? Probably some VMV Nation or some shit, right?
No. I think I would actually just, if this is I literally had to sit there on a desert island, I don't think I would take
Miles Davis or something. Come on, what is it?
I think I would take some Beethoven symphonies or something like that, just because if you had to listen to one thing forever, I don't think I want lyrics. I think I want something complex and timeless. And so I think I would probably just take some Beethoven symphonies, man. That would be probably good. I'd take some symphonic music for sure. I think anything else would just be too annoying to listen to forever.
I mean, I already know what the answer is, because even though I'm not someone, like, if people don't know, I don't ever use Spotify. So I'm not someone who has one of those things where I could show you the breakdown, but I don't need it because I already know through a mixture of both gaming, because I also do like music without lyrics when I'm doing work, and enjoying cannabis products, as like the aforementioned Freeze Pipe commercial, 10% off LFN at freezepipe.com. I know already the answer is any of the albums of Boards of Canada, because I've already listened to them 1 billion fucking times on repeat. So there you go. 1 million flights, 1 million books I've read, billion times. Essentially, that's like my go-to as background music. I've listened to it 1 billion times while reading books at the beach or whatever, you know. There you go.
Loved the culture video on The Thing, but I haven't watched any of the other movies you guys have covered so far and haven't had the time to watch all the movies, so I feel like I'm falling behind. Well, you can't fall behind because there's a new movie every week, so you can catch up at any point in time. I'm just going to put that out there. You can literally just be like, this movie interests me, I'll watch it this week or not. Or
it's
you can say,
the most evergreen series ever made. The movies are all 30 years old, and the video you can save it in your saved list. Come back you can literally come back 10 years from now as long as the YouTube channel's up. Watch the movie and then watch the episode, and it'll work the same. And you'll be like, oh, that Rich Lewis guy's alive and still like sober relatively. Like, you know, it might be even crazier in 10 years. Who knows?
Would you still heavily recommend watching the movies before watching the culture episodes, or is it doable due to the editing and the clips? Well, we try and make it so
all day long.
If you care about spoilers, the answer is no.
Yes.
If you're like me and you don't give a flying fuck about spoilers, then you can watch it all day. And I think we try and make it interesting by having the editing in there so you can see the examples. And we do provide a synopsis of the films. So hopefully, I mean, you guys tell us, that's feedback for us. Do you guys find it easy to watch if you haven't watched the movies? We're trying to make it easy to watch if you haven't watched the movies. But honestly, it is like a film club, and you can come and go. If you we announce all 4 films weeks in advance, so you can just watch the ones that are interesting to you and watch those episodes, or you can watch the films that are interesting. Don't watch the ones that aren't interesting, but still hear the context around them by watching the shows, right? I don't know how you guys are using this material. Like, I can't tell you how to use the material, but as Thorin says, it is evergreen content. The material can be used from now until forever. If one genre interests you, the reason why we're switching genres is to keep things fresh, but also because you probably don't want 3 months of cosmic horror, which we absolutely could have done, by the way. And so if you're kind of like, I don't really care about this genre, we'll just come back in a few weeks and it will have changed. And maybe you will care about that one, right? We're going to go through, we have a pretty large spreadsheets of stuff right now that we're working with. But I don't know. You guys tell us. Comment on the culture videos and tell us if you like the way things are going or how you're using it. So hopefully the discussion is interesting on its own and there's enough context that you can watch it. But I do think obviously you get the most, especially if you watch the films, even if you've already seen them, if you watch them again recently, which is what we're doing as well. We are, even if we've seen these movies a bunch of times, we are still rewatching them right before we do those shows.
Yes.
Well, you have any thoughts on that at all?
On what? The fact that, like, he doesn't watch the episodes. What's mad about that? It's like, half of that was like a fucking diary entry. So anyway, it's been hard at work. I haven't been able to keep up on the movies, but who gives a shit, man? Why do I care? That's the question. Look, thanks for paying, and here's an answer, but couldn't give a monkey's like money. He said, just fucking save it in a watch later list. Also, when you say that, I'm just going to say it, because this is my style. I just call it how I see it. You know, when you go, I haven't had time, you have had time. I guarantee you've played League of Legends, watched some dog shit LCS match. You've played you probably played fucking Baldur's Gate 3. You had time. You just chose to allocate it differently. So
also,
I'm not here to convince you to watch it. I think we did a pretty great job of talking about the movie as it is.
All of the movies that we watched in Cosmic Horror.
Here's the thing as well, by the way, they're not also all classics. Like some of them, for example, there's a couple of movies, I won't say which ones, but there's a couple, if you watch the episode, I'd say I don't like even. So they're not all a must watch. They're not all a must watch.
Yeah. And well, I mean, it depends on your definitions, but yeah, I think also when you say you don't have time, a lot of the movies in Cosmic Horror were like literally 90 minutes or less. From Beyond is like an hour and 20 minutes long. Event Horizon is like an hour and a half long. Given that most streaming TV shows these days are an hour long or almost an hour long themselves, it's honestly less of a commitment than watching 2 episodes of a TV show. It's not that hard. We're not watching 3-hour-long movies.
There's a few, it was maybe like 3 months ago now, but when someone asked me a question like, how do I get everything done productivity-wise? The problem is people take free time as like, well, I'm not doing anything then. honestly, if you actually schedule your free time, you will get more of it as well. Like as we're talking about here, instead of just watching like 4 episodes of an anime show on a second monitor, just carve out that like 2 hours and watch like an actual good movie and enjoy it and really like get the most out of it.
Honestly, it's been awesome for me too, because sometimes, due to having a family, I'm busy dealing with that in the evenings. But instead of just farting around in the middle of the day, for an hour not doing anything, I just literally just say, well, it's 1 p.m. I'm going to eat lunch and watch this movie now or this TV show for our culture shows. And it's honestly given me a break and made me more productive. So just do that. While usually last place teams are just plain bad, there have been surprising ones in LEC/LCS, Vitality, Almost, FlyQuest, Origin. Are there any interesting last place teams from LCK or LPL or others from the West? Well, I mean, last year we had Nongshim, which was way worse than you would have expected given their roster, right? Yeah, of course, we've had weird teams that have failed.
I mean, the craziest, obvious modern ones is like the Vitality one now, or the other upset OG when they were 10th place. Like,
yeah,
it's inexplicable how good those rosters are that with the 10th place. Yeah, that's mad.
Yeah, they're saying they in the West there have been rosters like that are inexplicably bad super teams. Are there any interesting last place teams from LCK or LPL? Like the Nongshim one for last year was pretty crazy from LCK.
The problem is it's going to be way less likely it happens in the LPL or the LCK because first of all, there's just more talent there, and then secondly, the difference can be so stark. Like, if you were as good equivalent to how good the players on Vitality, I don't think you could come last place in LCK. I don't think it's even possible. I think you'd still be like 7th, even on a really bad split, You couldn't really be 10th with players that good. Like, if we took fucking Viper and, you know what I mean, and we put these players in, they're not coming 10th, come on. They're going to win a few series at least.
Yeah. Tips for aspiring content creators who are too afraid to take the first step. You have to just do it. You just got to do it.
Right,
everything grows.
Frame that whole question, right? Hey, Monty, I see you are Michael Phelps. Tips on people who want to be really good swimmers but are scared to jump in the pool. Jump in the pool. What do you want us to say, mate? Here's the problem. I don't mind that y'all need like a dad/mentor figure, but we're not literally going to spoon feed you the fucking food. You have to do some of it yourself. Like you got to go halfway. Meet us halfway. Just do it.
Look, here's an example for you guys. We are doing these. You guys keep asking questions about the culture videos. We have no following in TV and film. None. Okay? Our viewership on those culture videos is way, 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 way less than our other podcasts. Like our biggest video on the culture channel is at like 15,000 views right now. Okay? And that's the video that we did on the thing. And it's a brand new channel. We're dealing with a space where we don't have the level of credentials or credibility or fame that we do in the esports space. And so what we would consider kind of bad viewership for a normal episode of our shows is what we're dealing with. But you know what? We have to just start that content and build the audience over time, which is exactly the same kind of thing in esports. And we're not getting down on ourselves because, the viewership is 10% or 15% of an episode of Summoning Insight, because we know when we started, you have to build your way up there. And we're confident that on a long enough timeline, and we know we're making very good content. We know we're making good content. You guys love it. The people who have seen it love it. All our analytics are like, our retention rate is crazy for the culture channel. So you guys are watching it and enjoying it. And eventually it'll build. You have to do it. So even people who have been very successful like us in terms of content creators, when we enter new spaces, we have to build too. And we are building and we will continue to build, but you just have to do it. You just have to do it. Best book you read lately, both of you. Well, I said I'm almost done with this really good book called Alexander the Great right now by, I think, Philip Freeman. And that's been very enjoyable to learn more about Alec. I think it's very compellingly written. It's very exciting. Trip through his entire life and the context of the ancient world at the time. So I have really enjoyed that.
What would I pick for this? Not really sure what I'd actually pick as my best one recently. I don't know on that one. I'll pass on that one.
Okay. What are your guys' thoughts around the dark tetrad and how such traits are exacerbated or enabled in the internet and how that influences culture. I don't know what the dark tetrad is. Do you know?
It means like the personality traits, like essentially like serial killers have and stuff. If you look it up, like dark triad is what the original one was, but obviously they must have made it 4 now. If you just look it up, you'll see what it is.
Okay, narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and sadism.
I mean, essentially, it does seem like the internet is the ultimate place where these traits succeed with very little downside,
right?
Compared to real life, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made that perhaps these traits being able to manifest on the internet provide a kind of release valve for people so they don't do terrible things in real life potentially, but I have no idea. I mean, I am very unfamiliar with this, so I don't know if I have I don't know if I have an opinion on that. In the last episode, you referenced one of Dennis's famous monologues from Always Sunny. How do you feel it stands up to Seinfeld in the genre of awful / petty people comedy? Any other shows / movies in this genre that you appreciate? This is more your wheelhouse than mine. I've seen only a couple episodes of Always Sunny.
The problem is, I do find it really funny because these are shows that are very well written. But I actually do think overall, like he sort of alluded to there, in a way, there is a negative aspect to the shows, which is the vibe of the show sort of is like, lol, isn't it funny that like fuck everyone else? Which is like, that isn't really my philosophy on life in general. But I would just say the key thing is these are both just very well written shows is the key thing for me. So like, to be fair, that sort of comedy does have like antecedents. Like for me, something like Frasier is sort of like that. Like essentially baked into Frasier is like the elitism, isn't it? Of like, well, of course he's better than other people and has a more refined taste and he's not some pleb like his dad or whatever. So I think there's similarities for sure.
Which LOL pro could be cast as Catherine Deneuve in The Hunger, always feeding on newer, younger talent to keep their power?
Obvious. It's obviously Bjergsen and all his junglers in it. So there you go. All his junglers are up in the coffin. Spoiler. It's waiting for their chance to come and get him finally when he retires. Yeah, I bet he did.
I was rather surprised about how Dota ranks when it comes to desirable new esports content delivery for LFN, but not anymore when I heard the reasoning. That made me curious too. Which titles would be next in line? Are more traditional sports channels coming before that, like a show with you and Thorin talking NFL? Possibly. I mean, I think Valorant is an interesting one for us, especially because there's a lot of crossover with Counter-Strike talent / fans, I guess. The similar genre. Maybe I wouldn't be
general rule. I would say that's a pretty good angle to answer on, which is it's more likely that we go based on the talent than the game. Like we're not just picking a game. Like, what about this game? It's more like for example, I'll give you a random example. If like DDK, for example, wanted to do some content, I would do some Valorant content tomorrow. He's just a mega talent to work with. But if there wasn't a DDK and it was just some game like Rocket League that I don't know, then maybe we're not as eager to get it. So I'd say I'm personally more about like the specific people I want to work with, you know.
It's also about the thesis behind LFN, which is that we want to work with people who want to generate a lot of content and have an end game of making a bunch of both esports and non-esports pieces. So, you know, if it's like people who are interested in doing a one-off show within a specific game, I think that's less interesting than us because the whole point of this is to be a long-term diverse partnership. So I think it depends.
I've been thinking of an answer to the book one. I'll give you one now. Basically, if anyone's ever read they'll know this guy, the biography that the guy David Goggins wrote, the guy who's like an ultra marathon runner who's been on Joe Rogan a million times and Jocko Wilkins podcast. That is, I'd waited a long time to read it and I was just reading it on like planes and stuff. It actually is a good book though. It's really compelling. Like you'll almost think like he made it all up. Like his life is super interesting for sure.
Which movie has the best cast, in your opinion?
I mean, here's what's funny. I actually think that one of the two movies I always say are my favorites, Heat.
I was going to say Heat.
Fucking unbelievable cast. People have to realize side characters in this movie are played by the following: Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
Like, these are like fucking bona fide A-listers themselves, guys. Like, it's actually an insane cast list, that one, mate. It's actually bonkers how good it is.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot, you know, once you get to a certain level of fame as a director, you just get crazy good cast. Like think about Oppenheimer's cast recently. Like Remy Malek is playing like a tiny, like barely speaking bit part in that. Josh Hartnett is back, I guess. Right. So Gary Oldman, like some of the greatest. Think about this. Two of the greatest living character actors, Robert Downey Jr. and Gary Oldman, are both in that movie. And
by the way, it's actually fucking hilarious how small a part Gary Oldman has in this movie. If you haven't seen it, it's genuinely like a 10-minute part. That's it. He's out of the movie.
But again, he's, of course, because it's Gary Oldman, he's also just completely unrecognizable within the role.
This is how gangster Gary Oldman is. He can simultaneously, Monty, in his career, have played Winston Churchill and who was it, like Truman or something, like Truman. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Like there couldn't be more different characters, could they?
So I don't know. I mean, obviously there's a lot of good casts. Heat is a very good one. But even just recently, it's like once you get to kind of like the peak of your fame and directorial powers, like Christopher Nolan has, you just end up with everybody just wants to like pile into your movies. There's probably some Quentin Tarantino movies as well that would qualify for this, just in terms of star power. Like, I'm not a big fan of Hateful Eight, for example, but cast is fucking insane in that movie. So yeah, I don't know. There you go. There's some of them. Off the top of my head.
I'll give you one that's a bit more out there. LA Confidential.
That's a good one.
The main characters are going to mega cast that one, because the key thing about that movie is it catches people like Russell Crowe while they're still on the up. So like they actually became way more famous after. So like that's a banger one, mate. Guy Pearce wasn't that famous when that came out. Like that has aged very well, that cast. Some fucking amazing actors.
Also, because Kevin Spacey is such a good character actor, there's going to be a bunch of potential Kevin Spacey movies as well in best cast of all time.
This is what's a little bit fucked up. I will give a disclaimer here, because obviously, if I was to use the most literal language, Monty, the most important thing I would care about with Kevin Spacey's life would, of course, be, did he commit those crimes? Did he do harm to other people? But the first thing I thought, this is where I can be a little bit selfish. The first thing I thought when that news came out that said he was found not guilty in that case was, so you ruined fucking House of Cards. So all those last seasons were just ruined for nothing. And we could have had him in the show. And then now can't go back now, can we? It's too late. It's over now. So there you go.
I thought House of Cards was terrible, so I wasn't too bothered by that. But as an actor, Kevin Spacey is one of the best character actors of his generation.
He's mega.
So good. So yeah, I think for me, what really makes a lot of these like best cast lists is you're probably going to have some really good character actor in there, and that could be Robert Downey Jr., it could be Gary Oldman, it could be Kevin Spacey, it could be Johnny Depp. But one of these kind of actors probably has to be in there, because they're going to provide the kind of interesting balance to like a really strong leading actor. And so I think you have to have one of those type of people in there. All right, that was the last question of the week. So we got through them all again, doing a good job of that every week. We will be back next week, guys, of course, to discuss LCS finals and LCK finals and the first round of LEC season finals, and Korea regionals will be going on. So still plenty of League of Legends to discuss here on LFN. Remember to follow our Twitch channel, subscribe everywhere. Thank you very much. See you next week.